quote, "Nobody in America should be fired because they're gay, despite doing a great job and meeting their responsibilities. It's not fair. It's not right. We're going to put a stop to it." Well, I guess from 2009 to 2012, President Barack Obama has changed his mind. He's changed his mind and decided that no, we're not going to put a stop to it. That can wait. Other things can't wait. Other things can't wait. We could make progress on this through an executive order, but we're not going to. We're not going to. That will wait. As we enter another campaign season, as we enter the 2012 campaign, let me ask you, my liberal friends, does this make you feel fired up? Does it make you feel ready to go? Are you ready to go campaign for President Obama? Are you ready to go knock on doors, donate to President Obama for this? Does this make you really want to go out and support him? Does it make you want to tell your friends to go and vote for President Obama, where he has the cowardice to not even to issue a friggin' executive order saying that gays and lesbians can't be discriminated against? Does that make you fired up? In another maddening story having to do with President Obama, the New York Times is also reporting. It's also reporting that a fund to support homeowners in the communities hit hardest by the collapse of the housing bubble has dispersed just 3% of its budget and aided only 30,640 homeowners in the 2 years since its creation, according to a report released on Thursday by a federal watchdog office. As of the end of 2011, the hardest hit fund had spent just $217.4 million out of its $7.6 billion budget. The program is intended to reach homeowners who are unemployed or living in areas with high unemployment rates or steeply falling home values, end quote. That is utterly and completely unacceptable and inexcusable. Now, this is part of the TARP bailouts. This is actually one of the an actual positive part of the TARP bailouts that was designed to specifically help homeowners, and they've only helped friggin' 30,000 of them. Only 30,000 homeowners have been helped because of this. They have like $7 billion and they haven't goddamn used it to keep these people from being thrown out of their homes. I can't say that I'm surprised. Excuse me, I can't say I'm surprised. Matt Stoller has a new report out that finds that income inequality has actually gotten worse under Barack Obama than it was under George W. Bush, which is horrible and crazy. Stoller found, using stats from the IRS, that from 2002 to 2007, that the percentage of total income growth of the entire country. Okay, say that again. The percentage of total income growth of the entire country by the 1% was 65%. So you understand that? So what that is 65% of the income growth in the country from 2002 to the 2007, 65% of all income growth went to the top 1%. That is ridiculous. That is friggin' horrible. I mean, again, 65% of the growth going to just 1%. That is ridiculous. Then we had the recession hit. The recession that happened from 07 to 09. So 09, the recovery began. So 2009 to 2010, under President Obama, the percentage of total income growth by the top 1% grew from 65% under George W. Bush to 90%.
You're listening to WEAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Good afternoon and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marin's guest hosting with this week, this Saturday, June 15th, 2013. And it is a beautiful day here at WEACT Radio Studios in Anacostia in Washington, D.C. Sunny but not too hot, though we have been experiencing that this week. With me in studio is Pete Johnny Depp Callahan, working the board as always, doing a terrific job. Pete, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful, Daniel. It is a beautiful day out. Everything is going wonderful here. And we have internet this week. We've had internet all morning. I'm just so impressed with Comcast and their level of service this week.
Well, Pete making a sub-reference, if you will, to some of the problems that we've had with our public utilities here, though we're not going to get into too many details. Of course, I'm sitting in the host chair today, not just in my capacity as executive producer, which normally I host the second hour, but of course because David Shuster, we are proud to announce, his wife, Kira Renner, recently gave birth to their first child, baby girl, Ayala Danielle Renner Shuster. 2 last names for Kira Renner and David Shuster. We wish them congratulations. Mazel tov. David Shuster's going to be out on paternity leave the next 2 weeks. I'll be sitting in guest hosting, but he may make a cameo appearance later in the show, and of course we wish him all the best. Such exciting news. And we've got a very exciting show ahead of us. We're going to be talking all of the first hour about the NSA leak. The leak revealing that the National Security Agency has the authority to hold the phone records of just about all Americans in pursuit of metadata. That was an order given by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act courts back in April. That was revealed in a leak to Glenn Greenwald. And this past week, that leaker came forward. His name is Edward Snowden. We'll give you all the latest on what we know about that leaker, everything that he is doing, where he's hiding in Hong Kong, what his story is, how he's being depicted in the media, what the political dynamics of this are, and whether we should really care, whether this is an important challenge to our constitutional rights, or whether it is just the necessary measures needed to protect us from terrorism. Well, I think that you'll find that I weigh in heavily on one side of that. But first, I want to introduce the man who's going to be sharing this desk with me today, my co-host in the co-pilot spot today, Cole Stangler. Cole is a recent graduate of Georgetown University. It has been a very short-lived tenure here at We Act Radio as an intern.
Short-lived.
A short-lived but memorable tenure. And Cole is beginning very soon his position as a staff writer in these times, one of the finest journals institutions in this country since 1976, providing the country with some of the best cutting-edge progressive investigative journalism, and specifically focusing on the labor movement and other independent social movements, really the stuff that just does not get reported on in the mainstream media. Cole has done excellent reporting on them for some of the lesser known issues on the Hill, in Congress. We're going to talk a little bit about that later when he tells us some of his reporting on food stamps. Cole, welcome to Take Action News.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here, excited to be a part of the program, and looking forward to the show.
Now, Cole, some people don't really know this, but in addition to being a fine progressive journalist and recent history graduate from the Georgetown University, you are also a talented musician. And I can say this personally because Pete Johnny Depp Callahan and I actually saw you perform in Adams Morgan last Sunday night with your band Betsy and the Bicycles. And you play a mean keyboard. You really jam out.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I heard you were comparing me to Garth Hudson, Richard Manuel in the band. Those are really high compliments. But yeah, Betsy and the Bicycles, band playing in D.C. If you're in the D.C. area, come check us out.
Where can people check out your music? Are you on MySpace? Are you on YouTube?
Yeah, we have a Facebook account. You can check us out. There's some YouTube videos, Betsy and the Bicycles.
Facebook.com/Betsy and the Bicycles.
Take a look.
Is that the URL?
Yeah, that is absolutely the URL.
Now, Cole, tell us a little bit before our syndicated stations join us in just about a minute and a half. I want to get into some of the roots of your ideological persuasion. You know, it's not every day that you hear about someone from New Canaan, Connecticut. Quite frankly, one of the poshest
we don't like to talk about that. Yeah.
One of the poshest parts of the country. You're a class trader, and you spent some time abroad in Paris, I believe.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And did that contribute to your involvement in sort of what I would call, frankly, radical socialist-leaning causes?
Hey, I mean, we have different definitions of socialism abroad there in Europe, but yeah, I would say, certainly in France. Spent some time. I lived in the immigrant suburb there and was kind of exposed to.
What suburb? Tell me, because I know them all.
Aubervilliers, northeast of Paris.
Aubervilliers. Which, for
Neuf-Trois.
those who don't know, actually. Oh, Neuf-Trois.
The Neuf-Trois is the 93rd department of Seine-Saint-Denis.
The 93rd department, which is in a suburb outside of Paris, is one of the roughest suburbs outside of Paris, and it is actually this. Though that may be overplayed, and certainly we demonize and exaggerate people living in poverty, but it was the site of, I believe, some of the worst unrest in the riots of 2005 in France. And so that's, of course, a very interesting subject. In just a few seconds, we're going to be joined by our syndicated stations in Columbus, Chicago, Grand Rapids, and across the country. If you're watching us on Take Action News, you can watch us on takeactionnews.com, youtube.com/takeactionnewstv. And in fact, click subscribe. When you subscribe on youtube.com/takeactionnewstv, you get clips of us in your inbox. Stay tuned.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Good afternoon and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins in the studio. Guest hosting this week because David Shuster, we wish him a great congratulations. He and Kira Rennert have a new baby girl. Ayala Danielle Rennert Shuster. The world is one Schuster better today, folks, and we send him our best wishes and congratulations. David may be making a cameo later in the show. I want to give a shout out to all of our listeners in Chicago and Columbus, here in the Washington, D.C. area where we're broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios, and of course across the country. You can watch us on our YouTube feed on youtube.com/takeactionnewstv. Follow us on Twitter at takeactionnews. On Facebook, facebook.com/takeactionnews, you're going to see all of the links to everything that we're doing. We're going to send out a lot of Take Action links today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We have an amazing show ahead of us, and we're going to be talking a little bit later about the labor history tour that's going on across the country. We're going to be checking in with Rick Smith. He's got fascinating information. They're going to be talking to us from New Mexico, telling us a little bit about some of the things that they saw in West Texas at the Bush Presidential Library in around Dallas. And of course, we're going to be talking with Sarah Anderson from the Institute for Policy Studies about a new report on corporate tax dodging, how the folks at Fix the Debt, who are claiming that they're proposing a balanced tax reform proposal, actually stand to propose something that would generate billions for the companies that they represent. And then later, Alan Rosenblatt is going to be talking with the man behind the Twitter accounts, the fake Twitter accounts for Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker, and a fake Twitter account for Glenn Greenwald was the name of the Twitter account that was blowing up Twitter. It has been discovered by some already, including Adam Weinstein and Adrian Chen of Gawker, but the man behind these accounts is speaking to the press explicitly and revealing himself explicitly for the first time on Take Action News. You're not going to want to miss that at 2 o'clock. But this first hour, we're going to be focusing on the news that has been dominating headlines in the United States and across the world. And that is the news of the National Security Agency leaker has come forward. That's correct. Edward Joseph Snowden. He's a 29-year-old systems administrator, contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton, working for the National Security Agency. 29 years old, but he apparently had extremely wide access to many of the National Security Agency's highest classified top secret files. We're going to be getting to that in a moment, but first I wanted to give a brief breaking news update from Turkey. We've been covering the protests there very closely these past 2 weeks, and there is breaking news out of Turkey in that just yesterday, on Friday, the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, did finally accede to some of the demands of Taksim Solidarity, the solidarity group that is operating in Taksim Square and has been occupying Gezi Park there, in a protest movement that started with protesting the razing of that park to replace it with a mall modeled on Ottoman barracks, military barracks, but then spread across the country into broader anti-government protests over the neoliberal economic policies of the Erdogan government and the AK party, as well as some of the creeping Islamist policies, crackdowns on public alcohol consumption, alcohol late at night, public displays of affection, things like that. Erdogan, who said that he would clear the park within 24 hours, then sat down with the protesters, apparently feeling the pressure, and said to them that he would wait to hear a court order as to whether the razing of the park, the destruction of the park to build for that mall, was legal in a lawsuit that was brought by this group, Taksim Solidarity. And even if the court ruled against Taksim Solidarity, he would put it to a national referendum. That was apparently enough to exceed some of the leadership of the protests, but the protest movement has remained in the park, vowed to stay in the park. President Abdullah Gül of Turkey essentially saying, go home. He was, of course, one of the more conciliatory figures within the Erdogan government. Now he has said, maybe it's time to pack up. We're exceeding to some of your demands. They're saying this protest movement is broader. It's bigger than just about the park. It's about the crackdown. It's about the crackdown on lawyers who were protesting, who were defending some of the folks in the park. It's about the broader authoritarian policies of the Erdogan government. But it remains to be seen whether the Turkish public will remain on their side, whether they will now lose the moral high ground, something that perhaps the lack of an organized structure there in Taksim Square and Gezi Park lends itself to. Moving on, of course, to the story that has dominated headlines across the country this week, and of course that's the revelation earlier this week that Edward Snowden, the man who behind the leaks revealing to Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian that the United States government through the National Security Agency has had access through a FISA court order to the phone records of millions of Americans we found at first to Verizon customers, which includes more than 100 million Americans. And now later it was revealed as well as the other main phone providers, AT&T and Sprint, were cooperating with these orders. He also revealed that through a computer program called PRISM, since 2007, the United States government has been mining all of the data that we use on our internet browsers, on Google, on Facebook, on Yahoo. Apparently not yet clear if they have access to everything through Twitter. According to law, they would still need some kind of a warrant to get the actual data there, but they're storing and collecting it, just as with the phone records, they're storing and collecting that metadata. Well, this person who remained anonymous, he also revealed, I should say, that the United States government has a wide-ranging plan of cyber hacking of targets across the country in which they are basically hacking into routers, collecting data and metadata from countries all across the world. And of course, one of their main targets is China. This comes as news because we have attacked China, and at least verbally, politically, in the public sphere so severely and repeatedly for apparently hacking our lines. Apparently we're guilty of the same. Edward Snowden, again, a 29-year-old contractor for Booz Allen Hamilton, a company that does 98% of its business with the federal government. He grew up in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. He was a high school dropout who enlisted in the United States military because he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to help liberate the Iraqi people. This was back in 2003. He broke both of his legs in training, and so he was honorably discharged. He then later became a security guard at a CIA facility where he achieved his GED. He was noticed, apparently, for his facility with computer software and programming and his demeanor in some way. He was recruited to be a CIA operative. He began work and training in the CIA intelligence services. He served as an operative in Geneva, an analyst there. And he said that one of the things that first raised alarm bells for him in terms of abuses was that he saw CIA operatives recruit a Swiss banker in Geneva to give them secret banking information by getting him drunk and arrested for drunk driving, encouraging him to drive home, and that way they would have power over him because they would be able to help him get out of the drunk driving charge, and that sickened him a little bit. But over the years, he saw many things, and again, he was a systems administrator, which was more than just a low-level analyst, and so he had the highest clearance levels. He had access, apparently, to the entire roster of the CIA, he claims, the entire roster of the NSA. And over the years, these things, these access to all of this data, this metadata that all Americans consume with very little oversight, began to raise alarm bells for him, and he found it disturbing how much access he had. And at some point, he essentially said he thought that the American people did not know, despite whatever approval they gave to things like the Patriot Act, which gave the government wider scope of authorities to survey these things. Despite that, the public did not know how widely this is being interpreted. Here's how he explained his decision to leak this information.
But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem, until eventually you realize that these things need to be determined by the public, not by somebody who is simply hired by the government.
And of course, there have been many accusations that Snowden is guilty of that he's guilty of exaggerating his role in this. That as a systems administrator, that he couldn't possibly have had access to that much information. And people are wondering, well, he's some high school dropout, and we'll talk about that in a moment, just how the media has been depicting him. But here's how he described the information that was at his disposal.
So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly have the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
And of course, Snowden has taken refuge in Hong Kong. That's where Glenn Greenwald and documentary filmmaker Laura Poitras caught up with him and conducted this 12-minute interview. I encourage you to watch it. View it. It is fascinating stuff. This is clearly someone who has thought out his decision very, very carefully. He said he's willing to take any risk to make the public aware of what the government is doing, because at some point he realized that he was helping, quote, create the structure of oppression. He left behind a job that was paying him more than $100,000, a girlfriend, a life in Hawaii where he was working for Booz Allen Hamilton, many, many, many benefits. And of course, now the government is after him for violating the Espionage Act, even though it is clear that he cannot have committed treason because he did not turn this over to an enemy of the United States. He is in Hong Kong, and there's been some speculation about why this is. He apparently believes that because Hong Kong has such a vibrant culture of free speech, that despite it being part of China, this is a great place for him to get a fair hearing. He does not want to be extradited to the United States. He hopes that the people of Hong Kong will allow him to be tried there and determine whether they want to hand him over to the United States or whether they want to grant him diplomatic immunity, something that they could theoretically do. Cole Stangler, who's here and my co-pilot chair today. Cole is a staff writer for In These Times. Cole, you've done a little bit of research into why he might be fascinated with Hong Kong. We do know that Edward Snowden, it has some libertarian leanings. Obviously, he's skeptical of this kind of government overreach, but we also know that he donated some money to Ron Paul. We have that information about his political beliefs. Why might that have to do with why he chose Hong Kong as a place to seek refuge?
Right. I mean, I think first off, politically, Hong Kong with its relationship to China means that, to get him extradited eventually to the United States makes it a little bit more difficult. So there's that one political reason. But, secondly, without speculating too much, there is a sort of tradition in the libertarian political imagination in the United States of Hong Kong being this, very free, being a vibrant, free society because of its free markets. Milton Friedman was a big fan of Hong Kong's economic policies and spoke high
Milton Friedman,
praise.
who is the father of the Chicago School, which is considered sort of the revival of neoclassical capitalist neoliberal economics in the United States, starting in the 1970s. And Cole, I mean, it's a fascinating point you make, and I think we're going to probably come back to that. But Cole Stangler, folks, he's fascinating analysis, great reporting. We're going to hear more from him as the show proceeds. But I'm going to start off by saying this. The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States states the following: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. It's known as the amendment that protects Americans' right to privacy from the government, from any other source or body. Edward Snowden is risking his life, his livelihood, and many other things, and we've seen in the media the rush to assassinate his character has been swift and decisive. But he did it because he was thinking about that amendment. He was thinking about what the Founding Fathers had in mind for this country. Certain select rights, the right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effects from unwarranted search. And when the government is collecting all of our data, all of our phone records, without us even knowing it, then someone needs to blow the whistle. And in that sense, Edward Snowden is the heir to the great tradition of whistleblowers in this country, from Daniel Ellsberg, and yes, even to Bradley Manning more recently, and across the world, including Mordechai Vanunu, who the Israeli nuclear scientist who revealed Israel's nuclear weapons program. He's a hero. He's gone at great personal risk to stand up for what he believes and for the Constitution of the United States and the rights we all have as Americans and the creep of the surveillance state. And I believe that regardless of whether he goes to prison, whether he's persecuted for what he does, history will vindicate his perspective. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with Marcy Wheeler. She's an independent journalist for Empty Wheel, emptywheel.net. She's written extensively about the legal issues surrounding this. She's going to tell us a little bit about just why the authority that the government has seized in this case is so scary. You're going to want to hear this, so stay tuned when Take Action News continues after this.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Jane Kuger of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast DC.
Welcome back to Take Action News. This is Daniel Marins, executive producer, guest hosting today because David Shuster is out on paternity leave. We are talking about the revelations by Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker who revealed to Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian this past week that the United States government has seized basically all the phone records of all Americans and has the ability to cull them and their metadata, which means the times of their calls and the numbers of the folks that they're calling, and has been data mining the internet for people's electronic exchanges through a computer program called Prison, has also ordered many cyber attacks on hacking the records and internet records of foreign governments, people in foreign countries across the world. The leaker came forward this past week, revealing himself to be Edward Snowden, a 29-year-old contractor for NSA working through Booz Allen Hamilton. One of the folks that has been covering this issue and the constitutional, legal, and policy implications of it all, perhaps the best, perhaps almost better than anybody, is Marcy Wheeler. She's an independent journalist at emptywheel.net, joining us now on Take Action News. Marcy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Marcy, why should Americans care? Didn't we all vote for politicians who voted the Patriot Act into law? And doesn't the Patriot Act have Section 215 that specifies that the government can, for, quote, an authorized investigation, protect against international terrorism or clandestine intelligence activities, seize intelligence without a warrant or sort of conventional probable cause? Is this really news?
It's not news to some of us who've been following it, but it's news to most Americans that using the words relevant to an authorized investigation meant that every American in the country is relevant to terrorism investigations, which is basically the premise the government is functioning under. So that's how they collected all of our phone metadata, which is who we call, the phone numbers, how long, where we called from, which is one of the most revealing parts of those data. But we're all relevant to terrorism now, according to the government.
One of the things that you mention is, and of course that folks that are defending these programs mention, is that they were used to catch a terrorist or a suspected terrorist, an Afghan-American taxi driver from Colorado who apparently tried to bomb the New York City subway system, Najibullah Zazi. And yet you claim that, you point out that in that case, it also represented a case of government excess in terms of intelligence surveillance. What exactly do you mean?
There's really good reason to believe that 3 people were investigated as terrorists. They were actually entered into a court document as associates of Zazi, of a terrorist, simply for having some association with him, which could be attending the same mosque. They were from Colorado, and he didn't really even know anybody in Colorado, but somehow these 3 people got sucked up into this investigation, and more importantly, for buying beauty supplies. The chemicals he used to build the bomb, which were really dangerous. I mean, his bomb was dangerous. His plot was dangerous. Don't make any mistake about it. But the chemicals that he used are part of beauty supplies and cleaning supplies. And so what the FBI did was apparently develop a list of everybody in Colorado who had bought them in some volume, cross-reference it with any known association with Zazi, and list them on a court document as associates of him, even though they were completely innocent, it now appears, of any tie to terrorism.
And of course, that can disturb a person's life tremendously, to be accused of terrorism or targeted simply because you belong to a mosque or bought acetone, nail polish remover, in the course of your purchases. And I think that's what some people don't quite get, is that this could cause lasting professional harm and harm to your reputation. Marcy, we went a little bit late on last segment. Would you mind sticking around for a few more minutes after this break?
That's fine.
Okay. Marcy Wheeler, she's doing amazing stuff. Marcy, I'm going to ask you also, because you did some of the most amazing reporting on the case against Scooter Libby for leaking the identity of Valerie Plame Wilson. Of course, you wrote a book about it. The cavalierness with which the national security establishment treated that intelligence breach compared with this one is something that maybe is an interesting thing to broach. So I hope you'll be able to talk about that. We're going to cut to break in just a moment, but when Take Action News continues, we're going to continue our conversation with Marcy Wheeler. So stick around.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor. A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the devil.
Colon cancer almost always starts with a polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh? I didn't even see you guys there. I don't know.
Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got phone calls!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marin's guest hosting today for David Shuster, who is out on paternity leave. Congratulations, of course, David, to the birth of his daughter, Ayala Danielle. We're continuing our discussion with Marcy Wheeler, an independent journalist at EmptyWheel.net, who has been covering this story of the National Security Agency and leaks by Edward Snowden extremely closely and meticulously and thoughtfully. I might add, I encourage you all to follow her work on Twitter at EmptyWheel and, of course, EmptyWheel.net. Marcy, you also were one of the reporters that followed most closely the story of Dick Cheney, or at least his chief of staff, Scooter Libby, basically being convicted of leaking the identity of CIA agent then Valerie Plame Wilson back in 2003, essentially as a way of taking revenge on her because her husband revealed that many of the nuclear claims that the Bush administration was making to take the country to war in Iraq were false. And at the time, essentially, this was regarded extremely cavalierly. Here's how Dick Cheney answered a question that this is Sound Element 15 on that in Meet the Press back in 2003.
Tim, Scooter Libby he's a good man. He's a friend of mine. He's somebody, one of the most competent and capable people I've ever known. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence.
Marcy, hearing Dick Cheney laughably sort of deny, and it seemed really a lot like he was lying there in that Meet the Press appearance, isn't it kind of a stark contrast to the way all of these security and intelligence officials are now telling us that Edward Snowden is a traitor, that he's caused a grave threat to national security by basically just outing a government policy that will continue, at least tentatively, going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to clarify one thing you said. Libby was prosecuted not for leaking Valerie Plame's identity, but for obstructing the investigation into whether Dick Cheney ordered him to leak it. So when he says that Scooter Libby is a great man, remember that Scooter Libby may have obstructed the investigation into Dick Cheney's orders to out her as a spy. But the reason I raise that is because one of the other things that's fallen by the wayside largely in the press is James Clapper's, not just James Clapper's, but James Clapper's lies to Congress about what was really going on. So when I first came on, you said, well, why should people worry about this? One of the reasons people should be worried about this is because James Clapper and others have been asked publicly on multiple occasions whether the government was collecting data on all Americans, and Clapper most recently in March said, well, not wittingly, and that's false. We now know that was clearly false testimony to Congress because the government is collecting the phone data on most Americans, and that's why you should be concerned, because part of the oversight process is in us being able to pressure our members of Congress when we hear things like that. The members of Congress being able to learn precisely what's going on, and therefore being able to fix problems, even if you like the underlying surveillance program, fix oversight problems, which pretty clearly still exist in this program, so that we're not just relying on it. Trust us. And when people do lie, when people do deliberately misinform the Americans about how extensive this is, it should suggest they shouldn't be trusted. It suggests that they're hiding stuff that may be still worse than what we know.
That's such a great point, Marcy. And of course, we do have some tape of James Clapper. He's the Director of National Intelligence. He's in charge of more than 16, I believe, intelligence agencies in the United States, which is a staggering number. And I think many people would even be shocked just to know that there are that many agencies. Here's how he explained essentially that lie that he made in a hearing last year to Ron Wyden. This is sound element number 9.
I have great respect for Senator Wyden. I thought, though, in retrospect, I was asked, when are you going to stop beating your wife kind of question, which is meaning not answerable necessarily by a simple yes or no. So I responded in what I thought was the most truthful or least untruthful manner by saying no.
So essentially he stands by lying. I mean, that is what that came down to. It was a pretty simple question. And of course, as the New York Times has pointed out, Alberto Gonzalez, when asked something similar about whether the government was listening in on their phone calls, he just didn't lie. He said, that's classified and I can't answer that question. So that's evasive, but at least he didn't lie. And, you know, it brings up such an important point, which is that if this is no big deal and this is no news here, then why are they so furious that it was revealed? And why are they so furious that now the public knows something that they claim that the public already authorized? On the flip side of that, of course, Senator Dianne Feinstein, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has called Edward Snowden a traitor. Bill Nelson, a Democratic senator from Florida, has called him a traitor, guilty of treason. Speaker John Boehner has. By all accounts, law enforcement agencies are pursuing him aggressively. But as Senator John Tester from Montana, a Democrat from Montana, pointed out, there's really nothing that violates security here. Presumably terrorists already knew that they're being spied on by the United States government in some capacity and take extraordinary measures to avoid being detected.
Right. And so the question is, why And the people who you named who are calling him a traitor, by the way, all of them had heightened awareness of these programs. All of them are the people who for a long time have been saying, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. They're on the line. And so no wonder they think he's a traitor for exposing what they have been downplaying at best and sometimes misrepresenting as well, because they're the ones who okayed this knowing far more than most of Congress actually does. One of the other reasons I think why the government is really embarrassed and angry that the data grab, the dragnet collection of American metadata in particular, is that the government has avoided real court and scrutiny of all these programs, as opposed to just the FISA court's very narrowly constricted ability to approve certain aspects of this program. The government has avoided real court scrutiny of it by ensuring that nobody ever gets standing in an Article 3 court, meaning they're making sure that I can never sue them and get discovery into what's really going on, and letting a judge say, not did that intercept abide by certain narrow rules, but instead, is that intercept and the larger program it's part of, does it comply with the Fourth Amendment? So nobody's actually weighed in on that yet. And one of the reasons they haven't is because these details have always remained secret, and no one's been able to prove in court that, for example, the government has been collecting all of our metadata.
You know, and Marcy, one of the things you also point out is that some of these claims are auditable after the fact. In other words, if the government targets a particular metadata point that they cull from all this stuff that they're storing, they can basically do it whether it's with a FISA court order or based on sort of their own interpretation of the Patriot Act. And if you think that your rights were violated, you can ask to have them audited after the fact. But that's obviously a very imperfect system. One of the things I wanted to bring up, Marcy, is also that you point out that these lawmakers had heightened understanding of this, these members of the Intelligence Committee in many cases. Yeah. Some of them, right, and certainly Dianne Feinstein did. And that they have these security clearances. People are making much of the idea that there are two senators that did sound the alarm bells on this, Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon and Senator Mark Udall from Colorado, that they obviously, Wyden asked that question of Clapper, asked him, do you have a dragnet seizing the personal information of millions of Americans? And they both warned, essentially saying that it's the authorities of these security agencies are much greater than Americans think, and it would shock Americans to know how great they are. But some people have pointed out there's actually a right of parliamentary privilege in the United States, and that in theory, these people, if they had been on the floor of Congress, could have revealed these top secret things, and it would have been acceptable. And we know that in part because Senator Mike Gravel, a Democrat from Alaska, back in 1971, read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record so that they would be publicized for the public, regardless of whether they were struck down by the Nixon administration. Does that tarnish a little bit this image of Wyden and Udall and I think Congresswoman Linda Sanchez from California in the House also sounding the alarm bells on this?
Well, and I think it was Loretta, not Linda, but I could be wrong on that. What Sanchez did was basically come out of a briefing this week and say, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg. The people in the House who've been making the same warnings as Wyden and Udall, and also even earlier than that, Russ Feingold, John Conyers, Jerry Nadler, Bobby Scott have all been raising the same kind of warnings on the House side. The issue, though, is whether or not, let's take Wyden, for example, partly at Wyden's pushing in 2003, there was an amendment to the defense authorization that basically said DOD can't data mine Americans. And I think that may have only been in place for 2004, but it was real legislative restriction on the kind of things that Cheney was doing, that the Bush administration was doing. And Wyden has been reasonably successful at pushing these while maintaining his access. Frankly, I was shocked that Dianne Feinstein re-nominated, because the intelligence committees are basically by invite only. And I'm glad that he remains on the Intelligence Committee, because you need to have some people on that committee pushing back. And I think that's the trade-off that members of Congress make. And it's not clear it's a good trade-off. It's not. I mean, one of the lessons that we have coming out of this and out of the drone strike debate is that our oversight really doesn't work because the top members of the intelligence committees often become basically the advocates for the intelligence community and not the overseers for the intelligence community. And frankly, they only know what the intelligence community briefs them on, and at least on drones, they're getting a very warped picture of what is going on with drones. And so, they think they know everything, and in fact, they know less than a lot of us in the public because they're not listening to just the kind of self-interested claims of the intelligence community.
It is such a good point. It really does appear as if the folks that are really in charge of overseeing these intelligence agencies have been co-opted by them and become their greatest advocates. Marcy Wheeler, she's a fantastic independent journalist. I encourage everyone to check out her work. EmptyWheel.net. Follow her on Twitter @EmptyWheel. And buy her book on the Iraq War and the Valerie Plame Wilson leak, Anatomy of Deceit: How the Bush Administration Used the Media to Sell the Iraq War and Out a Spy. Marcy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
When Take Action News continues, we're going to talk a little bit with Cliff Schecter about some of the more outrageous right-wing responses to this news about the NSA leak. Stick around after this.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting this week, Saturday, June 15, 2013. Because David Shuster, of course, is away on paternity leave. Of all the reactions to the news that the leaker of the NSA surveillance program, in which they are the dragnet that is seizing the phone records of millions of Americans and mining the electronic data of all Americans as well, the reactions by Peter King, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, were perhaps the most outrageous. He went on Fox News and said that not only did he believe that Edward Snowden, the leaker of this NSA secret information, should be prosecuted, but that the journalist who published the leak, Glenn Greenwald from The Guardian, should be prosecuted as well. Here's what he said.
I'm talking about Greenwald. Greenwald, not only did he disclose this information, he has said that he has names of CIA agents and assets around the world, and they're threatening to disclose that. Even the press has certain restrictions. I think it should be very targeted, very selective, and certainly a very rare exception. But in this case, where you have someone who's disclosed secrets like this and threatens to release more, then to me, yes, there has to be legal action should be taken against him. This is a very unusual case with life and death implications for Americans.
Joining me now to discuss this reaction is our very own Cliff Schecter. He's a co-owner of We Act Radio. Cliff, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
So, Cliff, what do you make of that Pete King remark?
Just another day in the Republican Party. You know, if it's not abortion being compared to the Holocaust, if it's not guns will make you safer, or evolutions from the pit of hell, or we go on this whole broadcast. I mean, obviously it's ridiculous. Journalists are a key part of what we, the reason we have freedom of the press is so that we have accountability. You shed a light on government so that government can't operate in secrecy. It's much more likely they'll actually do what you elect them to do, as opposed to what you don't elect them to do. So I don't take it seriously. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. That's really the only way I can take it.
But, Cliff, it's interesting that you're talking about the Republican Party, because some Pew polling this week revealed that some 64% of Democrats approve of this program, but back under Bush, only 37% approved of them, and it's now Republicans that disapprove of these programs more.
Right.
What are we to make of this hypocrisy? I mean, is it basically just straight up people trust the party that they associate with?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I was referring to Republicans there is because you brought up the Peter King statement. He's a Republican, and it seems like there's a statement that comes out that's crazy that comes out of the Republican Party every day. It doesn't mean Democrats. You brought up Dianne Feinstein and Bill Nelson calling, for this guy a traitor and everything. I mean, it doesn't mean the Democrats don't do some of these things too. And in terms of people out there who they support, yeah, it really is kind of sad. But it's amazing people's principles seem to be a little bit malleable compared to, depending upon who it is in office. I mean, to me, the fact that the numbers would change that much from Bush to Obama with both parties, it just becomes, I wonder what that's about. I mean, the Republican Party for a while now has been holding things against Obama that they just ignored when President Bush was in office, from civil liberties to debt to anything else. But Democrats now are showing in this poll that we can do the same thing, and it's sad because the Fourth Amendment, privacy, these are things that are tantamount to our democracy, no matter who's in office.
Yeah, and Cliff, what's interesting about this is that we're really seeing, I think, sort of different, a transcendence of partisan lines here, in the sense that there seems to be a growing alliance in some ways between kind of the right side of the spectrum, the libertarian branch of the Republican Party. And in fact, Peter King had some pretty funny things to say about that. This is sound element 12.
It really bothers me seeing so many Republicans and conservatives talking about this being spying and snooping. That, to me, too many Republicans and conservatives have become Michael Moores.
Too many Republicans and conservatives have become Michael Moores. I mean, that's kind of funny, right? I mean, is there a certain joy that you take in the fact that there was this backlash in the Republican Party to the Bush years, and we're seeing kind of a new bipartisan coalition, and sort of the neocon hawks like Pete King really freaking out about it?
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the damage that all these guys do to our country, I'd find the whole existence of the Republican Party at all amusing at this point. I mean, on certain domestic issues, like, for example, I work a lot on anti-gun violence. Guys like Peter King and John McCain are some of the few sane people in the Republican Party. But go to foreign policy, and they're the insane people, and it's other people that are insane on other issues that are actually seem to care that we're being spied upon. It's like, give me one Republican that actually is sane on everything, and it's hard to find. So yeah, this is definitely the neocon wing, the Bill Kristol, McCain wing versus the more of the Rand Paul wing. But the Rand Paul wing has its own problems when it comes to people's liberties too, when it comes to abortion rights and other things. So I mean, it's sort of like pick an issue and you'll find that 95% of Republicans are crazy, another 5% are decent. And again, that's not to let the Democrats off, because there's way too many blue dog Democrats and others who are terrible on a variety of issues, from guns to abortion rights to gay rights to, the Fourth Amendment and privacy too.
Cliff, I mean, but how feasible is it, in your opinion, that to build a coalition here between the Rand Pauls, if you will, and the Ron Wydens, the folks on the left that care about these issues and the folks on the right that care about it?
I think it's feasible. I mean, it has been done before on some other issues. It was done, I think it was Alan Grayson and Ron Paul that got together on auditing the Fed, for example, and looking into probably one of the more secretive institutions out there. So when it comes to kind of the secretive aspects of government and this, called the security state, whatever you like, I think there's definitely a coalition there. I mean, look, let's say I hope there is. I've said it before on this show, and I'll say it again. I don't trust Rand Paul. I mean, the one minute he's filibustering drones, the next minute he's saying if somebody robs a bank, they can get blown up by a drone. So, the libertarian wing of the Republican Party seems to me are very few and far between at this point, and aren't always consistent. But it has happened in the past. Ron Paul was certainly more consistent on these things than his son has been. If Rand can get to where his dad was, and some other Republicans stick to some of these principles, then maybe we will see that. I hope we do.
In fact, one of the people that was calling out the media in terms of their depiction of Edward Snowden was Kirsten Powers, a conservative writer, I think it's fair to say, and a commentator for Fox News. And she essentially said that they're going after Snowden in a way of character assassination, and it's a question of kind of just the establishment media versus everybody else. And one of the things they've been attacking him for is the fact that, he only had a GED and worked for the NSA. I mean, how qualified could he be? I mean, is this similar to the kind of attacks that they were making on Ellsberg back in the day? Briefly.
Sure, and I don't even get why they'd be doing that, because in a way, then they're attacking the NSA, aren't they? When
Right.
all the hawks or people like that are going after Snowden, he only has a GED, wasn't qualified. Well, then the NSA hired somebody that wasn't qualified. Isn't
Right.
that kind of on them? So I don't really see how they even win that argument. Although it's a strange
a
day
great
when I
point,
find myself
Cliff.
agreeing with Fox News Democrat Kirsten Powers, but I guess we're there.
A stop clock is right twice a day. Cliff Schecter, always insightful. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Coming up next, we've got a whole new hour. We're going to be talking a little bit more with Cole Stangler about food stamps cuts going on in the Senate and the House. When Take Action News continues after this.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, once again guest hosting today, Saturday, June 15, 2013. We've got an amazing hour coming up. We're going to be discussing food stamps cuts and how Democrats are selling out on that as well in this year's Farm Bill. But first, I wanted to continue a little bit of our discussion before our syndicated stations join us about some of the media depiction of Edward Snowden, because it does seem to be a blatant case of character assassination. They're going after Snowden. Well, who is this slacker who dropped out of high school, got his GED, and then somehow at the age of 29 was making six figures working for the National Security Agency? Well, if you hear him talk, he's clearly extremely intelligent. He was a systems administrator of some kind. He is clearly skilled in computer programming, had all of that going for him. And so the idea that it's even important, and of course in America we always value that the guy that picked himself up from a high school dropout and got a six-figure salary, it's a rags to riches story. And yet here it's being made to seem like it's even part of the news here, that somehow, how could the NSA hire this guy? Can we really trust him? And it resembles in some ways, I think, the way Daniel Ellsberg, the man who revealed the Pentagon Papers in 1971, was treated. They went after him for seeing a psychiatrist. I'm going to bring in right now my co-host for the show today, Cole Stanglin. He's a staff writer for These Times. Cole, you've been looking into this a little bit. How similar is the kind of depiction of Edward Snowden and the attacks that they're making against him in the media to Daniel Ellsberg?
Right. I mean, I think there is this, if we can compare Edward Snowden to this rich tradition of whistleblowers, Daniel Ellsberg, Bradley Manning, you can compare the self-sacrifice for the, betterment of the country, to illuminate issues that otherwise would not see the light of day. So there is this comparison. There's also the comparison of, the character assassination. And Daniel Ellsberg, very famously, I think 2 months after releasing the Pentagon Papers, the Nixon administration, G. Gordon Liddy, Edward Hunt, went in, tried to break into his psychiatrist's office to try to find some documents that would somehow discredit Daniel Ellsberg as being unstable. And you saw the same stuff with Bradley Manning, I think also. Much of it, I think, rooted in a kind of homophobia, too. It was, that Bradley Manning was unstable, that he was gay, that he just kind of never really fit in. And you're seeing the same stuff right now with Edward Snowden. I saw pieces.
It's such a good point. And, I'm actually surprised they haven't gone after Glenn Greenwald for some of the same reasons. The journalist that revealed these leaks, because Glenn is gay. Right. He lives in Brazil. It's widely known that. I'm surprised they haven't gone after him more as a traitor. I think that at this point, though, he's just so respected as a journalist that he's harder to attack on those grounds.
Yeah, you've also been seeing some of those kinds of attacks on Glenn Greenwald, and all this we all know is meant to detract from the actual issues, the content of the leaks, the content of the journalism that Glenn Greenwald's producing. There was a New York Times profile of Glenn Greenwald that referred to him as a blogger, right, not a journalist, saying that the Guardian isn't a British news site as opposed to a well-established British newspaper. So you're seeing this,
that might have just been jealousy on the part of the New York Times. They've been pretty good on this. They said that the Obama administration no longer has any credibility. The
editorial, right? Yeah,
the editorial page has really stood out in support of Snowden. Another one of the interesting angles here is the comparisons to Ellsberg and Snowden and Manning. And Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post pointed, again, the same thing. Well, Daniel Ellsberg, he had a degree from Harvard and a PhD, and he was a Rhodes Scholar and everything like this, and he actually called him a badass. That to me is ridiculous. But
is Bradley Manning not?
But the idea that Ellsberg, there may be some legitimate grounds in the sense that Ellsberg apparently first went to members of Congress, and when they ignored him, he then went to the media, and he tried to get it out through those normal channels. He also was initially in hiding, but after a couple weeks did turn himself into federal authorities. Now, my thinking about that is, and another distinction that people make between, let's say, Manning and Snowden is that Manning released a leak with a much wider scope, and that he was just dumping data not with like a narrow eye toward what would be relevant to the public, perhaps. though you could argue that in this environment we just don't know quite what is going to be relevant and what is not. The secrecy environment is so drastic. And of course, given that Manning has been tortured under United States military imprisonment, for Edward Snowden to be looking out for himself a little bit is not that shocking to me. I mean, quickly, do you think that Edward Snowden should turn himself in to make a point?
That's up to him. I don't. Given the kind of treatment that Bradley Manning has received, and given the way this administration has pursued whistleblowers, we all know this administration's gone after more whistleblowers than all previous administrations combined. I think it's 6 tried under the Espionage Act. So given the track record of the administration when it comes to issues like this, if I was Edward Snowden, I'm staying away from the U.S. government.
It's a great point. Cole Stangler, great stuff. We're going to be hearing more from him after our syndicated stations join us in just a moment. But first, of course, folks, you got to join us on YouTube. Go to our site, youtube.com/TakeActionNewsTV, and click subscribe. That'll allow you to get free clips of everything from the show if you haven't tuned in live in your email inbox. It's free. It's really easy. If you like listening to me, like listening to David Shuster, do it. And of course, you can subscribe to our podcast still on iTunes. Just a few moments, our syndicated stations are going to join us: Chicago, Columbus, Grand Rapids, and across the country.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Good afternoon and welcome to Take Action News with David Shuster, the show where we take you through the news of the week and tell you how you can take action to influence outcomes. This is executive producer Daniel Marins in the host chair this week and next week for David Shuster, who is out on paternity leave. We wish him, David Shuster, and his wife, Kira Rennert, a great congratulations on the birth of their first child, their daughter, Ayala Danielle Rennert Shuster. Another Shuster in the world. We're all better off for it. There's been a story this week that has not received much attention in the mainstream press, and that is that the United States Senate, under the leadership of the Democratic Party, has passed a farm bill. And the farm bill, what some people may not know, is the same bill where every year we appropriate money for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly known and more commonly known as food stamps. It's a program that provides food assistance to low-income Americans. Currently, the eligibility for that food stamps program is 130% of poverty or under. Folks can qualify for essentially script that allows them to buy food alone. And, well, turns out that the Farm Bill cuts those food stamps for many working Americans. Joining me in studio to co-host this show with me is Cole Stangler. He's a staff writer for In These Times. Cole, thanks so much once again for joining us.
Really glad to be here.
Cole, you have done pretty much the most authoritative reporting, I would say, on this issue of food stamps in the Farm Bill. Tell us, did the Senate Democrats preserve the program? Did they make sure that these food stamps were safe? I mean, it seems like the Democrats, that's something that they would fight for.
Right. So, I mean, you have two bills going on right now. The Farm Bill, and this happens every 5 years. It funds the Department of Agriculture, which funds nutrition programs, SNAP. And the Senate bill cuts $4 billion from SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The House bill cuts $20 billion. Now, in the Senate, the cuts are obviously not as drastic. Nevertheless, $4 billion to this program, while simultaneously massively increasing the crop insurance program, also cutting back on conservation programs.
So to get this straight, in the Senate, where the Democrats control the Senate, they are cutting $4 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps. Now, I want to make everything clear for people here. There was also an amendment that would restore those cuts in exchange for cuts in the federal crop reimbursement insurance program. That was something that was voted down something like 75 to 25, maybe a little bit different than that, including by members, liberal progressive Democrats like Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa, who's retiring in 2014. So this is really outrageous. There was an amendment by Kirsten Gillibrand of New York to restore these cuts, to restore this funding, this $4 billion in funding. And just to give you an idea of what this means, this is $4 billion over 10 years. And we're talking about a program that spends about $74 billion every year under current law. So we're talking about $4 billion out of a total of around 750 billion over 10 years. So it's not a tremendous amount, but for working and poor people who are living dollar to dollar anyway and are living on a food stamps diet that is extremely Spartan, extremely difficult to live on, every dollar counts.
Right. And I think also there's some important political ramifications of this move also. When presumably the Senate and the House are going to go to conference on the Farm Bill and try to come up with some sort of middle ground on how much they're going to cut. And so for the Senate, under Democratic control, to go ahead and just slash $4 billion like this immediately, setting that bar that low means that eventually when they go to conference, we're going to see, I would suspect, more cuts than we otherwise would have seen if the Senate had decided not to cut funding at all, which would not have been outside the realm of possibility, given the majority that they have. So I think there's also that political implication of it.
Cole, you bring up a great point, which is that the negotiating strategy here seems completely bogus to me. In other words, if the Senate Democrats start out with their opening bid essentially being that they're going to cut the program by $4 billion, and the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Republicans, have a farm bill that they're about to pass this coming week, that they're going to cut the food stamps program by some
$20 billion over the next 10 years,
which will dramatically reduce eligibility for the program, throwing 2 million people off the rolls.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that. Obviously, we're going to get something in the middle, but it really boggles the mind that the Senate Democrats would start with an opening bid of cutting the program.
Right. It does not bode well. But so the bill in the House, what you just said is correct, that it's effectively going to throw 2 million people off the rolls of food stamps. Because basically right now there's this option, in most states provide this option. It's called categorical eligibility, and it means that if you have, as you mentioned before, the line is the threshold is 130% of the federal poverty line. So if your total assets, your total income, your gross income is above that, but your disposable income is below the federal poverty line, you can still receive SNAP benefits. And so this affects people primarily with high healthcare costs, child care costs, people with, that live with seniors in the family, that have, high healthcare costs or child care costs. And so these people, about 2 million Americans, under the current House bill, are going to be thrown off food stamps. So not only are you getting those 2 million people, but additionally...
So those are folks, just to be clear, who have, under a certain provision, under the current rules for SNAP, for food stamps, folks that have disposable income under 130% of poverty, because their primary expenses, such as healthcare and presumably maybe housing, render their disposable income less than that, would now be ineligible for the program completely.
Right.
And these are mainly folks that have people with disabilities in the family, seniors, high healthcare costs, those kinds of individuals. Now, you've also pointed out something in your article, which I encourage everyone to read in these times, and follow Cole Stengler on Twitter @Cole Stengler, and in these times on Twitter @InTheseTimesMag, and that is that by rendering these folks ineligible for food stamps at the federal level, they may also then become ineligible for food aid at the state level.
Right. I mean, so the free meals program. This affects children basically who, because of their eligibility, their household's eligibility for SNAP, are able to receive free meals provided by schools. And so this affects about a couple 100,000 children are now going to lose their access to the free meals program because that eligibility is tied up with their household SNAP eligibility. So not only are you getting 2 million people thrown off SNAP, but you're also getting those additional couple 100,000 of children now who are not going to be able to get the free access to free meals program at their schools.
Cole, there are some conservatives that have claimed that President Obama is the food stamp president, and that as part of the stimulus, he expanded the eligibility requirements for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Is this just rolling that back? I'm confused.
I mean, so you had that expiring. So you had additional boosts in food stamp eligibility because of the economic crisis and because of part of the stimulus. So that's expiring anyway. So these cuts are coming in addition to that immediate drop off. So you're already seeing about,
just so we're clear, this $4 billion in cuts that the Senate Democrats are proposing is on top of an expiring expansion of eligibility that had been underway. It is not just offsetting that expansion in eligibility. Just so people are clear, the food stamps program, 47 million Americans depend on it directly. it's believed that many more Americans are food insecure or somewhat hungry. Cole, I can't help but think that there are now many members of Congress, and especially progressive members of Congress, who have taken recently the food stamp challenge to live on food stamps for a month to see what it's like. I know Jan Schakowsky's talking about it. Does that play any role in the thinking here? I mean, you would think that that would help move the needle here, because when Jan Schakowsky's tweeting this stuff, a little bit of fruit for breakfast, a small sandwich for lunch. I mean, you really have to be really spare with this stuff. This is not a generous program living fat on the hog.
Right. I mean, the average monthly income, I saw this figure, it still even shocks me. The average monthly income of a single person on food stamps is $784, which is a pretty shocking figure. So these are the kind of people that are being targeted. I should also point out, people talk about, this has become a big talking point, as you mentioned, Obama being the food stamp president, SNAP being this bloated, inefficient, wasteful program. SNAP is actually one of the most efficient programs run at the federal level right now. In fact, in the Farm Bill, which expands the federal crop insurance program, gives it a $5 billion boost. That program was acknowledged to be more wasteful and more inefficient than the food stamp program by the Secretary of Agriculture himself, Tom Vilsack, acknowledged that. This idea that SNAP is inefficient and wasteful doesn't really hold up, I think.
And Cole, I have to ask, I mean, why has this story not even caught on in the progressive media? As far as I can tell, you have been the only one sounding this alarm in these times. Where has Huffington Post been? Where has Daily Ghost been? I'm not even talking about the mainstream media, because I'm not even. I have lower standards for them. I just assume that they're going to ignore it. But the progressive media have not even really rallied around this issue.
There's been a little bit of coverage. I think PBS had somebody on talking about it the other night. I saw Huffington Post have been doing a little bit of coverage. But it just hasn't been receiving the play that it should, and that's because it affects people that don't have as much of a don't have that much leverage when it comes to making policy in Washington. When it comes to making policy for the Farm Bill, the people that the big agriculture, these businesses are the ones that are pushing for their legislation. They have a bigger voice. But when it comes to people on food stamps, they don't factor that much into the equations. And when it comes to what's politically feasible and what's politically in vogue, so I think that's part of it, because it affects such low-income people. You don't get as much attention.
Well, folks, we don't need to be apathetic, and we don't need to let big agribusiness determine how these farm bills are made. We don't need to throw people off of the food stamp rolls to give more government giveaways to big agriculture, big agribusinesses through things like these bloated, fraud-ridden crop insurance programs and the direct payments themselves, which is completely outrageous. Go, take action, call your member of Congress. That's what we're all about here on Take Action News, is actually giving you these opportunities. Use the PopVox widget on our Facebook page, facebook.com/takeactionnews. And I have to give a specific call out to one senator, and that is Senator Tom Harkin. He's a progressive champion. He's a New Deal liberal. He's a champion of Social Security and Medicare. He's a champion of organized labor. He's one of the staunchest progressives you'll find. He's also retiring in 2014. So he has no political threat here. And yet, because I have no choice but to suspect that because he's a senator from Iowa and that he's close to some of these big corporate agriculture businesses, that he voted yes on this bill and against the amendment to restore the funding to food stamps. Senator Harkin, you grew up poor. How dare you? How dare you betray the progressives that have put faith in you, the voters in Iowa that are on the food stamp rolls, poor and working people in this country that need that money to survive, in favor of agribusinesses. Until you give us a better explanation, we'll be forced to assume it's your ties to big ag in Iowa. But come on the show and explain it to us. We invite you. When Take Action News continues, we're going to be talking with Rick Smith. He's the host of The Rick Smith Show, and he's on a labor tour of the United States. He's going to be talking to us from New Mexico. This is exciting stuff, folks. You're going to want to stick around for this, so stay tuned when Take Action News continues after this.
Our children are exposed to violence every day. in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying your home. Free consultations at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting this week, Saturday, June 15, 2013. Folks, if you follow labor policy and politics in this country, then this man needs no introduction. Rick Smith is the host of The Rick Smith Show, and he's leading a labor tour, a tour of labor history in the United States across the country right now with his RV and broadcasting every night from the road, and currently speaking to us from Roswell, New Mexico. Rick, thanks so much for joining us on Take Action News.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Appreciate the time.
So you're in Roswell, New Mexico right now, but I understand you guys just passed through Texas. And a lot of Americans hear Texas, they don't think labor unions, but you visited West Texas. Tell us exactly what you did there and why that's important to labor history.
Well, we went down to West Texas because of the explosion back in April. Again, another one of these reasons why we need to have sane, rational, sound regulation. This site, the epitome of deregulation, a 93-foot crater in the earth, hundreds of homes destroyed, an elementary school destroyed, a nursing home destroyed, and you look at this, and it's been over 2 months now. Almost nothing's been done. It looks eerily like it did the day it probably happened.
And it's one of the fascinating things is that apparently the guy that owned the plant, who didn't report all this ammonium nitrate, these enormous amounts of explosive materials to the local government authorities, to the Department of Homeland Security, to OSHA, you name it, or rather OSHA didn't investigate him enough. Apparently he's
1985, Daniel. 1985 was the last time this place was inspected. 1985.
And I mean, but you go there, Rick, and is there outrage? I mean, because what I've heard is that the guy that owned the plant is sort of a beloved figure in West Texas.
But here's the thing. Here's my emotions ran the gamut, from sad to tragedy to angry to sorrow for the victims and the people. And I stood there on the street where the school, 500 feet from where the explosion happened. I'm standing there with my daughter looking at this school, going, what would have happened if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of late evening? What would have happened to those kids who were sitting in that school being 500 feet from 500 times what Timothy McVeigh used to blow up the Murrah building, sitting right there 500 feet from that elementary school? Anger was my first thought. And then, just sadness that, this is where we've allowed things to go.
And we're talking with Rick Smith. He's the host of the Rick Smith Show. I encourage everyone to tune into his show every night from 9 to midnight. Now on the road, a tour of the labor history of the United States. Is any of this changing? I know that Texas has perhaps the lowest union rate in the country, and as a result has also one of the highest workplace fatality rates. Is it changing? There's talk of an upsurge in sort of economic populism there now with some of the Latino immigrants looking to demand their rights. What are you seeing in the Sun Belt right now? I mean, when you talk to people, are they starting to feel like the class war?
As we're moving across the country, Daniel, with the People's Tour for America, and if you want to see where we've been, where we're going, who we've talked to, all of that, peoplestourforamerica.com. As we're talking to folks, I think they're getting it. And I've always said there's only so much of what people are willing to eat. I think people are getting to that brink. To highlight Texas, last year Texas was one of 2 states to see an increase in union density because they're getting it. As we're going across the country talking to people, seeing communities that are broken and blighted, there is so much work that needs to be done and so many opportunities to move the country forward. And sadly, our politics are broken. Sadly, the people that we've elected, they're not out here on the road. They're not seeing and talking to the people that we're talking to. Those people seem to think everything's fine. I'm telling you, out here on the road, people are struggling. People are looking for help, and there's so many opportunities, Daniel. It's just, it's infuriating.
Rick, I understand that recently you had an infuriating experience yourself in that your tour stopped at the Bush Presidential Library outside of Dallas. What was that like?
Bush was the greatest president in the history of this country, by far, hands down. In fact, his museum told me so. So much there to get into. We could spend a week, but there's a couple of things that really grabbed my attention. What I consider his biggest failure, which was 9/11. Right when you walk into the museum, there's a huge girder of twisted metal that came from the World Trade Center. To me, I don't know that I would have highlighted that. When you took the digital decision maker tour, when you did the I'm the Decider theater, it really signified for me the Bush outlook on how he handled the presidency. Very black and white, very simplistic, very either or. In all of the scenarios that I went through, you're given 2 black or white options. There's no nuance. There's no thought that went into any of this stuff. And that, to me, sent a very clear message. But if you go through the museum, it was what it was. It was spent a whole lot of money to rewrite the Bush presidency. As someone who lived through it, I looked at the walls and the displays, and it's going to try and rewrite his legacy. And as you've seen, his approval rating has gone up for the first time. He has a higher approval rating than disapproval rating.
It's amazing, Rick. I think the American people.
I think a lot of it is this PR.
We can't stop telling that story until we learn that lesson. People's Tour of America. Did I get that right?
People's Tour for America.
PeoplesTourForAmerica.com. Rick Smith, the host of the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for joining us on Take Action News.
Have a good one, Daniel.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting the show today, Saturday, June 15th, 2013. wanted to talk a little bit in this segment about the latest developments in terms of the sort of economic budget and austerity debate in Washington, D.C. and across the country. There were new developments on that front this week in that the credit rating agency S&P, Standard & Poor's, upgraded the sovereign debt rating of the United States to a AAA rating, leading many to say that this is the sign that austerity has ended, that it has been discredited, that the United States credit has been restored, that there's already been $2.5 trillion in deficit reduction, 3/4 of that's from spending reductions, and that has effectively closed whatever gap we've needed. But some people aren't looking at it that way. And of course, we talked last week about the fact that the Center for American Progress made their own pivot, saying that we needed to reset the fiscal policy debate. But the budget hawks won't give up. And here were some of the most recent developments on that front. Maya McGuinness, who is the president of the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, said basically in an article that it was essentially saying, with the guy Bob Furtick, who founded Reputations.com, she said, quote, "Silicon Valley, it's time to disrupt the status quo in Washington, D.C. We need an overhaul of the budget that fixes the drivers of the debt, unsustainable increases in the costs of our health and retirement programs, and an outdated tax code that aligns the budget's priorities with a long-term growth strategy for the country. In Silicon Valley, we are willing to try new things and let those that don't work fail. With the government, too many outdated and ineffective spending and tax programs live on well beyond their usefulness." Cole, I have to ask you, Cole Stangler is a staff writer in these Times, co-hosting with me today. It seems to me like they're grabbing at straws. The Peterson crowd, the Wall Street funded deficit reduction hacks that are really more about cutting taxes for the rich and keeping them low and cutting social programs that the middle class and poor depend on, like Social Security and Medicare, are freaking out a little bit. And they're realizing that their moment in the sun has gone. I mean, is there any other way to interpret this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely encouraging. We're seeing the signs that this grand bargain, the so-called grand bargain, seems like it's off the table, and I think that's definitely a very encouraging sign. Although I would have to still caution back on, having too much optimism that this wave of austerity is over. I mean, austerity has always been a kind of dubious intellectual position to take. Just like the policies of it have never been particularly compelling, only from a purely intellectual point of view. But even politically, I think, austerity, while it's maybe, losing some support in Washington, I think we still have plenty of evidence that we're still going to have a lot of work to do, I think, in Congress from preventing further cuts to taking place. We just saw it with the food stamps cuts that are taking place, $20 billion in the House. You still have a White House that's on the record as favoring recalculation of benefits, Social Security, cutting Social Security. You had, the president's budget talking about cutting low-income heating assistance. So you still have, it's still politically in vogue. It may not be as prominent as maybe a couple of years ago, but I think we still should not be, too optimistic.
But I think we should make fun of these budget hawks.
I think we should definitely make fun of them.
Because this article about Silicon Valley, it's time to disrupt the status quo. It's like she was using all these tech buzzwords like disrupt. Yeah. We need disruptive technologies to, change the game, to gamify, and to, to try what works. I mean, it's just sort of funny to me. Another one of the developments, but you brought it back to the seriousness, Cole, and I want to bring it back to that, which is that, even though the ideology has been discredited, these cuts are still going through, and of course the sequester has taken effect. That's cut tremendous amounts for low-income programs. Now, the Center for American Progress, in their article, their paper, arguing that we don't need a grand bargain to replace all of the sequester, they were basically saying that the White House should now try to replace the sequester by offsetting it elsewhere or canceling it for at least the coming 3 years. And that's what we need, that the economy is still sluggish. We're still looking at above 7% unemployment and much greater long-term unemployment, underemployment, and that these cutbacks have essentially been damaging. And yet, the sequester's in place, so that's very grave, and we do need to take that seriously. And we're also looking at another debt ceiling showdown in, it's believed, the early fall. And that was also interesting this week because the president once again is trying to stave that off, and we could be looking still at a grand bargain because they're so desperate to avoid another situation of brinksmanship over the full faith and credit of the United States government, the United States government's ability to honor all of its obligations to its creditors. And that's why we saw this week the president meeting with Senate Republicans. But one of the things that he met with the Senate Republicans about, they were also moaning and crying. And Ron Johnson, the Republican senator from Wisconsin, led the charge in calling for a 30-year budget window. That we should look, that instead of having a budget that plans for funding or looking at the effects of spending and taxes in the next 10 years, every single budget should look at the deficit in the context of every 30 years. Now, I should make clear that the CBO, we always have access to that information, but very rarely do you look at the effects of one particular policy on the budget beyond the first 10 years. I mean, there's so many different factors that can't be looked at there. It just, to me, it reinforces once again that these people cannot be spoken to like rational human beings.
No, I don't think that either. You're talking about Maya McGinnis's comment, and it'll be interesting to see how long this charade, how long this game of trying to pretend like this is this big national crisis that needs to be resolved immediately, how long it's going to continue. I was thinking back to, I just graduated from school, from Georgetown, and I remember we had it was the Pete Peterson crowd coming down. They had a tour of college campuses and actually to try to promote the idea that this was it's a young person's problem, it's a moral question, and they had all kinds of contests for, I think they had a contest to write poems about how bad the debt was. I'm not making this up. So they went on a tour across college campuses, trying to promote this. And as a young person, I wonder how much people buy into it. I don't think anyone really buys it, but it'll be intriguing to see how long this is given mainstream play, and how long this kind of goes on for.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. In addition to sort of these kind of cockamamie policy suggestions by Republicans on Capitol Hill, yeah, these so-called bipartisan centrist groups that are really fronts for Pete Peterson, a private equity billionaire who has made his life's mission cutting Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
That's like his
his raison d'etre.
Before he dies, he's in his 80s and he's been trying to do it for decades. And we've had the worst economic crisis and a sudden uptick in the debt, and he hasn't really even been able to move the needle. By some estimates, he spent more than $500 million on all these various programs, teaching curriculums, the Fiscal Times, partnerships with the Washington Post. He's really trying to stick his tentacles everywhere. Mm-hmm. And one of these things is this attempt to really co-opt young people and to say that young people should want to cut these programs because we're diverting too many resources toward old people.
Right.
As if that's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that they don't buy it. But, just to give an idea, they have a budget ball where you can play a ball game that involves seeing how much you have to cut. Weigh something onto the ball, add something to the ball.
Forget about student debt. This is really a lot more important. Let's cut Social Security.
It's basically like you're out of work. That's the fault of Wall Street. You're not making as much money. That's the fault of a sluggish economy and a government that's not willing to do the proper stimulus because we're lobbying it to reduce the deficit. It's a problem that they're helping to contribute to in that sense. And then they're saying, but don't take it out on us. Don't take it out on Wall Street. Don't take it out on the government officials who are not taking action to actually help the job market and increase wages. Take it out on old people. It's a classic. It's a bait and switch. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and then divide and conquer too. Try to set up barriers between, different age groups.
Yeah, I always tell the joke, which is that a billionaire sits down with a Tea Party member, or an unemployed college student, and a grandma on Social Security, and there are 12 cookies on the table, and the billionaire takes 11 out of 12 of the cookies, and lets the two of them fight over the half of the rest of the cookie, and turns to the college student and says, "See that old lady over there? She's still in your cookie." When he took 11 out of 12 to begin with.
Yeah, that's
another one of these ridiculous things that I really want to draw people's attention to, which is that coming up on Monday, June 24th, there's a concert called Rock the Debt, and that is the Fix the Debt campaign, which is not just Pete Peterson, but all of these wonderful corporate CEOs like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, the folks, Dave Cote from Honeywell, Jeff Immelt from GE, the people that aren't paying any taxes and yet at the same time want us to cut our benefits decades before we even would need to confront that problem, are sponsoring this concert at the 930 Club, and it's called Rock the Debt, and it's basically a concert to get young people really riled up about the debt. So I'm gonna go to that. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, I think that might be worth checking out. I want to see Jeff Immel dance at the 930 Club.
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know if any of the Fix the Debt CEOs are going to be there. That would be really exciting.
Yeah, that
would be really. I mean, Dave Cody gets down. Everybody knows that. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about precisely this issue, and that is Fix the Debt and how disingenuous they are, because many of the same companies that are members of the Fix the Debt Coalition and are pushing for these so-called reforms stand to benefit from a popular tax plan they're pushing. When Take Action News continues after this.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders who invest in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting on the show this week. Joining us now in studio to talk about another fascinating aspect of this austerity debate is Sarah Anderson from the Institute for Policy Studies. Sarah is the director of Global Economy for the Institute for Policy Studies, IPS. You can follow her at Anderson_IPS. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sarah, you co-authored a report that was released this week called Corporate Pirates of the Caribbean, in which you basically explain that this Fix the Debt coalition, representing many CEOs, stands to gain tremendously profit in the hundreds of billions of dollars from many of the same proposals that they're calling responsible deficit reduction. What specifically are we talking about?
What we're talking about is what's called a territorial tax reform. So these big companies, many of which are already shifting profits to tax haven countries to avoid paying their fair share of taxes here in the U.S., want to permanently exempt their foreign earnings from U.S. taxes. So it would give an even bigger incentive for them to be hiding their profits overseas and avoiding paying their fair share to Uncle Sam. And what we did is we looked at how much these companies have already accumulated in their offshore stashes. And based on that, we estimate that if they get this territorial tax reform through Congress, they stand to gain as much as $173 billion in tax windfalls.
And we're talking about something like 59 of the Fix the Debt companies, including companies like General Electric, which we know got a $3 billion tax rebate from the federal government last year. Companies like Honeywell, companies like United Parcel Service, John Deere, mammoth companies that make tons from United States consumers, from United States workers, and yet, as you're explaining right now, many of them, through accounting tricks, report their earnings overseas in places like Bermuda and Luxembourg. And one of the interesting things about the report was that you point out that in the overseas profits of these companies make up more than the entire GDP of Bermuda and Luxembourg, and yet they're reported as being earned there. It's kind of, it's really transparent, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely outrageous. Companies like GE have armies of tax lawyers who work every day to figure out new tricks for avoiding paying their taxes here in the United States. And pushing for this territorial tax reform is just one more of these loopholes that they're going to use to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. And it's particularly galling when they're part of this group called Fix the Debt that's out there talking about how we should have shared sacrifice. We need to be responsible. You know, everyone needs to do their fair share to deal with this deficit problem. And yet, if you look at what their agenda really is, it's about getting more tax breaks, like this territorial tax reform, and then paying for them through cuts to Social Security and Medicare.
It's a fascinating perspective, Sarah, and I encourage everyone to check out the report, Corporate Pirates of the Caribbean. You're absolutely right in that these Fix the Debt groups, they claim that they're bipartisan, and the way that they do that is because they say we need more revenue. And then they talk about, well, you know, it's 2/3 spending cuts and 1/3 revenue. Of course, the deficit reduction up to this point has been 3/4 spending cuts. And the revenue they talk about is through this comprehensive tax reform system. And so I want to just try and give them their due, if you will, try and play out exactly what argument they're really making here. And that they're saying, currently, the actual the official corporate tax rate in the United States, the highest rate, is 35%. The effective rate, we know, it ranges from something like 10 to 15, rarely ever higher than 20. You've got a bad accountant if you got that. But their argument is essentially this. If you let us have amnesty on the money that we've been hiding right now, overseas by essentially allowing us to bring it home through this territorial tax system and say that if it was earned overseas, then it can go untaxed. If it was earned overseas, rather, or that'll be taxed at the rates that they have in those countries, and in many cases it's places like Bermuda that are tax havens. But then we'll bring the money home to our banks here, to where we hold our money here, and that will prompt us to reinvest it in jobs and business here, and ultimately that will somehow generate more revenue. They also say that if we're allowed to bring it home and then we lower the American U.S. corporate tax rate, then that will also encourage corporations to stop faking this reporting overseas, and they'll bring it home from overseas where it was going untaxed, and then they'll be willing to have it taxed in the U.S. because the tax rates are lower. But you basically point out that this is all voluntary, and there's just no record that because these things seem like they would encourage corporations to do that they actually will.
Exactly. And our past experience is just the opposite. So back in 2004, they made this argument then too. They said, oh, our money is being held hostage overseas because the tax rates in the U.S. are so high that we can't bring it back here. And if only the tax rates were lower, then we could bring this money back and use it to create good American jobs. And so they granted a temporary tax holiday, a deeply discounted tax rate for money that was brought back from these overseas pots. And what happened, the companies that took advantage of that tax break did not create jobs. In fact, many of them followed up with mass layoffs. And so this is just an empty argument. We've tried it before. They didn't use the money to create jobs here. It's just one more way for them to avoid paying taxes.
Now, I understand that the Fix the Debt Coalition is none too happy about your report, Corporate Pirates of the Caribbean, and they've expressed their displeasure. What exactly have they said?
Well, they said it was a bunch of lies, if I recall exactly. The head of Fix the Debt, Maya McGinnis, was quoted in the Huffington Post saying that. And they've also put out a press release now saying that we just don't understand that they haven't taken any clear positions on anything, especially on how to treat foreign income. And this is just another example of Fix the Debt being very slippery, because we copied and pasted into our report proof that they have on their own website materials promoting territorial tax reform. This is out of a PowerPoint that they have developed for the CEOs who are the members of this coalition to use for educational purposes to try to recruit more members. And it says very clearly that one of the budget needs that has to be addressed is a shift to a territorial tax reform. So it's right there on the Fix the Debt website. Anyone can go and look at it. And yet they're trying to play this game where most of their materials are very general and bland and hard to specify. And yet we know who's behind this campaign. Erskine Bowles are behind this, the co-founders of it. They're for territorial tax reform. The materials on their own website say they're for territorial tax reform and cutting Social Security and Medicare. And so we just shouldn't be fooled by their very slick advertising strategies and these, very aggressive statements by their spokespeople.
And in fact, this is what they've always done with their Social Security and Medicare cuts. They say, well, we haven't endorsed a specific plan, but they always limit the options to including deep Social Security and Medicare cuts. Yeah. They always get behind a tax reform plan that must have lower rates. That's one of their big things. Right. And I specifically remember during the Bowles-Simpson hearings, Erskine Bowles saying, we need to switch to more of a territorial system. So, this is one of their hobby horses. And you, the folks at Institute for Policy Studies, have been doing perhaps the most invaluable work in the entire country on it. Sarah Anderson, thank you so much for joining us on Take Action News and sharing this amazing report, shocking report.
Thanks for having me on. My pleasure.
When Take Action News continues, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the social media implications of the Edward Snowden leak. Are they really mining our data? And who's behind that weird Edward Snowden Twitter account? Well, that guy's going to be on the show in just a moment. When Take Action News continues after this.
Hey Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Jane Kuger of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Hello, welcome to Take Action with David Shuster, the executive producer. Daniel Marin's guest hosting the show this Saturday, June 15, 2013, on this beautiful sunny Saturday here in Anacostia, Washington, D.C. We've got a great final hour ahead of us. We're going to be hearing from Alan Rosenblatt, his social media segment. He's going to be talking with the man behind the fake Edward Snowden Twitter accounts, the first explicit admission and interview with that person. I think we'll reveal his identity shortly. We may have already done it on social media. But first, Alan's going to join me this first 6 minutes. Alan, you've been digging a little bit into just what this PRISM program is and how it affects social media. I know you had a Twitter chat about it earlier this week. Tell us what you've been finding.
Well, it's good to be here, Daniel. And I just, for me, an important issue is to make sure that when we discuss these important policy revelations and challenges and problems and controversies, that we should have the facts rather than the hype in order to get to the heart of it. Because otherwise, you end up not getting to the real issues, and they're important, and you get lost in the debate over it. So there are some things that I've heard, across the country in terms of how people are talking about this stuff. It started out with the Verizon and AP phone surveillance programs, and a lot of people seem to be talking about it as wiretapping when in fact it was just call logs. And while wiretapping is horrible, we don't want to talk about that since that's what it wasn't that. But it was something serious. They were looking at call logs, which allows you to glean a lot of information about who people are talking to when they're talking about it. If it's call logs with regard to mobile phones, we're actually talking about being able to locate where they were when they made the phone call and be able to put them in proximity to a known terrorist who might have been using a cell phone right next to that person. So there's a lot of information that can be taken from that, but it's not the same as wiretapping, and it would be used to identify future wiretapping should a warrant be awarded. Earlier I heard you talking about the comparisons between Ellsberg, Manning, and Snowden, and I think it's important to recognize that while they're all whistleblowers of a type, they're not the same. Ellsberg really was revealing known crimes, bombing Cambodia against the law. That was a very serious breach, and he had evidence of that. Manning, on the other hand, was a large net, and there really wasn't a clear sense of crimes being committed, but rather a lot of embarrassing information and maybe the exposure of a crime, but it certainly wasn't. It was more like the kind of vast phone record haul that we're complaining about from the NSA than it is a warranted dive into a specific probable cause research.
Alan, I think that's a really great point, and I think that some people believe, though, that the Manning leak helped expose a bombing of civilians in Afghanistan. But I appreciate that distinction. That is very important to note, that he was casting a wide net, that was a judgment decision. Cole Stangler's shaking his head, though, in the co-host chair here. Cole, you feel a little bit differently about it?
Well, I'm saying, I understand that the scope is certainly different, the leaks that were that Bradley Manning revealed, but also specifically that incident with showing the U.S. helicopter taking out those journalists constitutes a war crime under the Geneva Convention. So I think that.
Right. But the thing is that we want to focus in on, what's similar and what's different. Analogies break down not only if they're not similar in some respect, but also if an analogy only really works technically in terms of logic if there are no dissimilarities and it completely captures the similarities. Once you have sort of a partial comparison or match and some extraneous information, the logical validity of the comparison, of the analogy, actually breaks down. So it's not that there aren't important lessons to be drawn from the comparison, but we shouldn't overstate it because that undermines our ability to draw those lessons and establish the credibility of those lessons.
Alan,
That's all I'm trying to.
Alan, in about a minute and a half, we're going to pause as our syndicated stations join us, and then we're going to probably continue our discussion with you. Briefly, though, you've been exploring also this issue. If you can explain for us whether through the PRISM program, the United States government was getting direct access to electronic records, things like Google, Facebook, other social media. What have you been able to decipher?
There's been this talk about how there was server-to-server access. That's sort of the way the PowerPoint slide that was revealed, that Snowden exposed, in the way he's been talking about it, that somehow this NSA could do a query into Facebook servers, a query into Google servers. Facebook, Google, Twitter, they've all vehemently denied this, and I think there's real credence to this. And essentially, because it was left vague, it didn't really leave open, the actual happening. I've been asking around in the cybersecurity community. There was a big conference in town this past week, and basically the best assessment of what is going on here is that it was a human-mediated exchange. That when Snowden was talking about initiating a search at will, any analyst initiating a search, it means that they would put a request out to Facebook for information about this person. Facebook would evaluate that request, and if they complied, if there wasn't a warrant to compel them, they would provide that information and load it onto a server that was separate from their system servers.
It's fascinating stuff, but we can continue it briefly in the next segment. Alan Rosenblatt, Dr. Digital, always fascinating. When Take Action News continues, those are syndicated stations join us.
Oh, drat these computers. Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internets. I've used on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes. They're so naughty and so complex. Computers are my forte.
Well, folks, that sound can only mean one thing. It's Dr. Digipol with his weekly social media segment, Dr. Alan Rosenblatt, the guru of all things social media and online organizing. Today with us in studio in We Act Radio in Anacostia, Washington, D.C. Alan, thanks so much for joining us. Hold on a second, Alan.
Sure.
I think we were having some sound issues there, but I think now we're back.
Yeah.
Alan, we have I think we're working on getting this together at the moment, and that is getting the identity of a man who essentially imitated Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker, on Twitter. I believe we now have him on the line. And Alan, first, you were talking about some direct access issues in terms of you were
about PRISM.
About the issue of PRISM, about how the national security agencies get this information, how wide of a dragnet and how direct their access is to these online platforms. And you're essentially saying, you're telling us that it is mediated by a human, and that Facebook and everyone else like that doesn't just hand over massive records, or that the government doesn't go into their server.
So when there's a need to initiate a request for a person's records from Facebook, the request goes to from a NSA analyst to Facebook. A person there assesses it. Usually a warrant or something along those lines requires the process, and then the information is taken for that person and probably put on a server that's separate from the Facebook servers, that then the NSA can FTP the data from the server.
And just so we're clear, you know that from a source within the industry who you can't name?
Yeah, so it's not a certain assessment, but based on the information that's been given out, it's the most likely, given the information coming from Facebook and Google, given the slide in particular and what was left out, information that was left out of the slide, even in Snowden's own own representation, there's nothing in there that explicitly says direct access from NSA servers to Facebook servers. Nothing in there at all. So,
But in theory, I mean, couldn't these social media outlets and everything like that, and I don't want to go too far down this hole, couldn't they also be restricted by the law from revealing if they did give direct access?
To be honest, Daniel, if they allowed this kind of stuff and it ever got out, it would be the instantaneous end of those businesses. And so I just don't think that that's a plausible explanation. I mean, Facebook is worth billions of dollars, and if they did something like this that could shut their business down overnight because everybody would massively retreat for lack of faith in them, I mean, there's just no way that's I got to go for the most simple explanation as being the most plausible one, and that certainly is not the most simple explanation.
Well, I think we have a guest on the line right now, and that guest is named Tyler Bass. Tyler is the Washington correspondent for the Internet Chronicle, and the man behind the Twitter account, E. Joseph Snowden. There was a fake Twitter account for Edward Snowden, the NSA leaker, that got more than 4,000 followers at its peak. Alan, take it away and introduce Tyler.
Welcome, Tyler, and really glad that you've chosen our show to reveal yourself on. I want to sort of start the conversation about sort of parody sites. There's a parody site out there called Kaz Hirai CEO, who is the CEO, or a parody of the CEO of Sony. And this parody site tweeted the other day, rumor, Xbox One will not function if the Kinect camera cannot see Doritos and Dew in the room. Okay, so, humor is a great way to sort of expose the issues in a way that allows you a lot of flexibility, a lot of the ability to be very provocative, and to some degree, or to a great degree, the J. Edward Snowden account that you created is an example of that. So why don't you walk us through what your thinking was, what you were trying to accomplish with this account?
Well, I'm not going to deny. First of all, I want to thank you guys for having me on, and thanks for talking to me. And I want to wish David Shuster a happy Father's Day in his absence. Anyway, I'll get to your question, though. I thought that it was a way to serve as a form of watchdog journalism. There's just way too much trust by the public in not just this, Twitter handle, but just many different ones. People don't. It's 2013, and people have not developed a really healthy sense of incredulity on social networks. And first of all, I just wanted to point that out. It was a form of media criticism because it duped a large number of journalists who are very eager for clickbait. They're eager for to get on a ground level scoop, and often without really confirming it. And I think this really bears that out. Second of all, I wanted to see what degree of support people were willing to show. I think the very fact that a handful of people accused me of directly working for the CIA or NSA is extremely telling. That goes to show how jaundiced these agencies' reputations have really become in the last month. So that was the main purpose of it.
So let me ask you, I had my own personal experience on election night, and it wasn't a satire site, but I had tweeted something through an old work site that was incorrectly called, reported that NBC had called an election for Elizabeth Warren up in Massachusetts about 45 minutes before they actually did. And many of the mainstream news media simply ran with a story that NBC called it without referencing my tweet and without verifying it on the NBC website or NBC sources. And your example of this account, which duped a lot of mainstream press and probably a lot of other people unwittingly, on the one hand, it's nice to sort of use that satirical platform to shine the light on the issues. But if you're being satirical and therefore not entirely accurate in what you're saying because you're trying to be funny, and so many people are duped by it, don't you actually end up doing a disservice to the media audience and a disservice to the country because you're driving people in the wrong direction?
Well, that's the thing. The Twitter handle itself wasn't really a media outlet. It was It could have been created by anyone. And I mean,
but you are a reporter.
I'm a reporter, and the bylines on the website, even the satirical one, in which I occasionally write under my own name, actually exclusively report real information.
But the Twitter account did not.
No. That, and indeed, that is not my personal Twitter account. But indeed, the Sock Puppet did not.
Right.
It did make serious points in between, delving into stereotypes about libertarians and John Birch characters and things like that. But I thought that the mix was interesting, and I would just hasten to add that there are media sources that people have a good reason to expect veracity from, like David Brooks, for example, who they're not reporting inaccurate information about Snowden, but they're reporting things that are just vastly unimportant. And I think that the existence of this Twitter handle in which people, I think a lot of them apparently weren't duped at all, and they just thought it was humorous. I mean, we still have 4,000 followers, and I imagine some of them have caught wind of the fact, given what we've been tweeting, which is admission, or indirect admission, or just utterly ludicrous statements like that Al Roker is involved in the Bilderberg group. I think a lot of them seriously can detect the sarcasm.
Yeah, I think he had an accident while he was at the meeting. But I think, I hear you, I'm by no means saying you shouldn't do satire accounts, but I think that the idea of setting up a satire account, especially one that can be very convincing, creates some externalities, some unintended consequences of people thinking it's real and the implications of that. And so given that, and you've had this chance to kind of do one of these satire accounts, maybe more than one in the past, and the question is, given that you want to try to use it to both make things funny, but also to raise questions in a way that drives the conversation forward. What lessons did you learn in this process of how to be better at doing that so that you would avoid this idea of misleading people with your humor?
Well, if someone took it seriously, obviously they didn't see it as humor. I mean, that goes without saying. I think that people need to be, more skeptical about everything they read, including from sources that always purport to be honest. I don't know if I've learned any lessons from it. I think I gained a lot of insight into the kind of people that are willing to believe very serious and very outlandish conspiracy theories, which I've understood from the very beginning is very much it's
common America.
It's the Ron Paul crowd. I learned a lot more about them, and people who complain about the Council of Rome or things as bizarre and completely incredible as weather control. I mean, frankly, the kind of people who really humor that sort of thing, they're being duped by people who are trying to dupe them, like Alex Jones. I mean, even Naomi Wolf has been on her Facebook page hypothesizing that this guy is some sort of political surrogate, which is, I think, utterly absurd. And it's a big business. It's a big business. And it taught me what a big business, the conspiracy business, really is.
Interesting. What is your, after doing this and obviously covering the story more generally, what is your impression of Snowden? Is he, should everything he said be taken as completely accurate? Is he trying to mix in some whistleblowing with some self-promotion? Or is he totally full of smoke?
Well, given that you and I can only speculate on the materials that he wanted released, which we just do not have access to, I mean, those are locked up at the Post and the Guardian and the NSA, I really can't wholly judge whether what he would have us see or supposedly would have us see is really in the public interest. I certainly think the slides that the Guardian and the Post, to their credit, have released are very much in the public's interest of right to know. There's no doubt about it. But, can I assess information I don't have that it's in the public good? No. And I will certainly be, I'm very skeptical of the notion that he would, he has not published this information in some other outlet, which he could do in some way, in some other outlet. And, it appears, and I can only speculate about this, that he is using it for assuring his own safety. Is it like Manning? I praised Manning quite a bit on the account, but is it exactly like Manning? No, I mean, Manning gave it to everybody. And I think that's at least a more admirable goal than should Mr. Snowden choose to use it to gain credit or leverage with a foreign government that will harbor him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The idea that Manning and Ellsberg both took actions to make sure that their materials that they were revealing were publicly accessible, regardless of what the authorities and the media who they were relying on chose to do, is a big difference. That, as you say, is yet to be determined whether that's the route that Snowden will take.
Hello?
Oh, hi. So I thought I heard Daniel talking, so.
Here at this point, folks, got to wrap up that segment. But Alan, thanks so much for joining us as always. A fascinating segment. You really did help illuminate some of the subtleties there, distinction between Manning and Ellsberg and Snowden. And Tyler, thank you for joining us and sharing the story behind that Twitter account that so many of us found entertaining and controversial.
Well, great. I was glad to be on, and I'd like to give credit to other correspondents who helped, with the Greenwild account and with this account a little bit. That would be James Cochran of the Internet Chronicle, as well as Billy Walsh.
And Tyler, I just want to commend you on your use of the word panopticon.
Thank you.
We all love some Jeremy Bentham and Michel Foucault. Coming up next on Take Action News, we're going to have our activist of the week, Michael Pettit. He's the president of Every Child Matters. You're going to want to stick around for this. Take Action News continues.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, guest hosting once again. And of course, we have one every week. That's right, it's our Activist of the Week segment. And this week we are privileged to honor Michael Pettit. He's the president of Every Child Matters as our Activist of the Week. Michael, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Michael, tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Every Child Matters and what Americans need to know about the kinds of challenges facing children in this country right now.
Well, right now there are millions of children still living in poverty, millions still uninsured, millions reported abused and neglected, and the investments that are being made in these kids are really lagging, and the U.S., in comparison to other rich democracies, really ranks near the bottom in terms of overall child well-being. What Every Child Matters was founded to do was to interject children's issues into the election cycle and to challenge candidates to address kids' issues. And this year, the state that we are focusing on is Virginia. We've probably been in 20 states, but we're going to do the Virginia governor's race, and we will, this coming week, unveil our Strong Kids, Strong Virginia campaign. The whole purpose being to invest in kids, make us more competitive globally, help care for an aging population, and of course it's morally the right thing to do as well. And finally, we will be releasing a poll at a series of 5 press events this week on Virginia voters, and we'll be talking about what their attitudes are towards investments in kids.
So you're getting involved in the Virginia gubernatorial race, which is really only one of 2 gubernatorial races in the country, and obviously it's more controversial because it looks like Chris Christie's got it on a lock in New Jersey, and it's between Bob McDonnell, or rather I should say Ken Cuccinelli, the current Attorney General of the state of Virginia, and Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe. Now, have you gotten a positive response from either of these individuals about, I know that, has Virginia adopted the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion? Is that something that's part of the issues on the ticket this year?
Well, that will be. They have not finally taken a position on that. I think Mr. Cuccinelli has been clear that if he's elected, it wouldn't be expanded, and it seems that it would be expanded if Mr. McAuliffe is elected. At this point, we are scheduling meetings with the candidates. We will be inviting them to appear at public forums, and we will be circulating a statewide petition that we're going to be urging Virginia voters to send to the 2 candidates so that they actually put this as one of the top issues to be discussed in this electoral cycle.
You know, Michael, one of the things that I know that I work during the week as the policy director directly of Social Security Works, an organization fighting to protect Social Security, and one of the tropes that we hear time and again from the folks in the sort of austerity for everyone but the rich community is that somehow there's a trade-off between devoting resources to children and devoting resources to our seniors and our people with disabilities. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think this country is still very rich, and it can serve both the needs of its aging population as well as children. I don't think it's an either-or proposition. I think that some of our priorities are very skewed. Defense spending, I believe, is way more than it needs to be, and many other people who know more about the military than I do say the same thing. We have a very bloated health care system, medical care system, really. Formal studies of that say that at least 25 to 30% of a $3 trillion health care budget is wasted. The question of corporates paying appropriate taxes, subsidies to ExxonMobil, subsidies to farmers. all these things would be addressed before we would start saying, let's cut seniors and let's cut kids. By the way, the federal government spends about 7 times more per senior than per child. And part of that is...
Well, I would caution against using that figure because it doesn't take into account state and local spending, most of which is education and a lot of the in-kind stuff that children get. But your point is extremely well taken, and I couldn't agree with you more. Michael, we have one question that we ask every activist every week, and that is, how did you get involved in activism?
Because at a very early age, growing up in the state of Maine, I saw people working very, very hard and struggling to get ahead. And when I went to a private college, I'm sure I was an early affirmative action candidate, a French-Canadian extract up in Maine. I went to a very nice little college called Bowdoin College, and I saw how well some people lived that didn't work very hard. And I thought, what is wrong with this picture? How come I know so many people work so hard and struggle to get ahead? And, of course, I was influenced by the Martin Luther King period. I grew up in the late 50s, early 60s, and John Kennedy's candidacy. And then I just saw a lot of people, ending their lives with not much money in their pockets, and a lot of kids who grew up struggling without much. So I grew up in a working-class environment, and I think that helped promote the activism.
Well, it is so inspiring. Michael Pettit, the president of Every Child Matters, you are our Activist of the Week. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, and I'd urge your listeners to visit...
of course, StrongKidsStrongVirginia.com. We're going to be following that gubernatorial race very closely, and of course, EveryChildMatters.org as well. How about that, folks? Affirmative action for French Canadians. Need a little bit more of that in this country. That's what I think.
That's right.
When Take Action News continues... David Shuster is away on paternity leave, maybe making a little bit of a cameo appearance. We've also got breaking news out of Turkey as the police are clearing Gezi Park as we speak. When Take Action News continues after this.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit ufmhealth.org/canceranswerline.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little. and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
And welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, once again guest hosting this Saturday, June 15, 2013, with my co-pilot, Cole Stangler, a staff writer for In These Times. We have breaking news to report right now from Turkey in that the government of Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan had threatened to close down the encampments at Gezi Park in Taksim Square in Istanbul. They said that they were going to do it tomorrow on Sunday, but they have begun doing it in a nighttime raid, it appears. They are coming in with tear gas canisters, clearing out the tents. There are live streams of this going on as it occurs. This comes days after the protesters and the protest leadership had negotiated a deal, apparently, with the Prime Minister's government, suggesting that at least some folks in leadership had accepted Erdogan's plan that he would accept his proposal, that he would accept the court ruling on whether the government had the authority to destroy the park and build the shopping mall that they were planning there, and as well that he would hold a referendum after that, even if the court ruled against the protesters. Many protesters then determined that they would continue to stay despite the compromise that was reached. The president, who serves in a less powerful role, but has served as kind of a good cop figure in all of this, President Abdullah Gül of Turkey, said essentially after this agreement was reached with at least some of the figures from Taksim Solidarity and these other groups, open channels for meetings and dialogue is a sign of democratic maturity. I believe this period will produce good results. But he said that everyone should now return home. And he did that from Twitter, which has been played a crucial role in communication throughout this protest period these past 2 weeks. We've also seen a government representative named Hussein Celik say, if the issue is about the environmental concerns, respect to the green, all of these messages have been taken, necessary assessments have been made. From now on, prolonging this any longer just spoils it. Now, of course, the protesters claim that this protest turned into much more. The mere fact that the Prime Minister Erdogan, was intervening in such an active way in what should really be a local Istanbuli issue was a symbol of his authoritarian nature, someone who wanted to extend his leadership indefinitely, switch to a presidential role and an empowered presidency, someone who would crack down on the press, dissidents, that he had fined CNN Turk back in 2009 for being critical of him, $2.5 billion, which was nearly all the money that they were worth or made. This became something much bigger than just the park. We also know that recently there was a funeral held in Ankara for the 5th protester who was killed, hopefully the final protester, though we can't say that for sure. His name was, and Nicole, I'll bring you in just a moment, his name was Ethem Sarisuluk. He was killed in protests in Ankara, the capital city of Turkey. 26-year-old worked in his brother's wedding business in the capital city of Ankara. An actual bullet, was found in his. It was either it was a piece of metal. It was either a bullet or part of a tear gas canister. We believe now that it was a bullet was removed from his head. It's believed, a live ammunition that was used on him. He was killed by police. His mother blames Prime Minister Erdogan. Tayyip made brother kill brother. I'm not blaming the police. The police are also our children, but Tayyip gives the order. Tayyip is, of course, the middle name and the name that Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan goes by most often in Turkey. And I can also say that report that the mayor of Ankara, in a show of support, perhaps particularly nasty, to throw salt in the wound with Prime Minister Erdogan, hung a banner praising the police on the site where this figure was killed in Ankara, and tomorrow is his funeral. But the mayor of Ankara hung a banner praising the police once again where Ethem Sarısuluk was killed. It's too early to say just how deep these divisions will run in Turkey in the coming months, if and when this protest movement does die down, how it will affect the Erdogan government. There's already talk that the European Union, which condemns some of the use of police brutality, if Turkey were still to want entry into the European Union, this might pose greater difficulties for them. But it appears as of now that the Erdogan government has maintained its hold. And I should make clear that in the raising of the Occupy Wall Street encampments across the country, I don't believe that any protesters were killed, but there also was tremendous use of police brutality, and Western governments, developed governments that we like to think of, often have difficulty striking a balance between honoring people's rights and to assemble freely and clearing out public spaces. So Turkey, this is nothing like any of the revolts and the violent suppression that has occurred in any of the Arab countries throughout this period, things like what occurred in Libya, Syria, by orders of magnitude. Nothing like that. They do have internationally recognized free elections, and while there may have been some recent crackdowns on some of their civic institutions, including the press, they do have a vibrant press, they do have a vibrant court system, and I think that needs to be made clear. Cole, you wanted to jump in.
Well, I mean, I wanted to push back on one thing in particular, which is that Turkey, I mean, I'm looking at the press freedom ranking. Turkey has a very low ranking on that. I think they're ranked 154th. So this is one of the major driving, I mean, obviously we should avoid comparisons to the kind of stuff we saw in Libya, even Egypt, but just important to point that out. But I also wanted to point out, I mean, you were talking about the crackdown that's going on right now, and literally the crackdown is happening right now.
Yeah, what can people follow if they want to see this in real time?
So I would really recommend, if you're on Twitter, go to Occupy Gezi, just the hashtag Occupy Gezi.
Occupy Gezi.
And you can follow this happening right now. The riot police have gone in there for the first time in 18 days. So this is actually a major development. And I also remember reading as well that the Public Sector Union Confederation, the same confederation that went on strike, I think it was last week, said that if the police went in, that they were going to go on another strike again. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, whether or not this crackdown means that the kind of movement's going to fizzle out, or that we're going to see even a stronger pushback with organized labor with the protest movement. So it'll be very interesting to see.
Now, at the time that strike occurred, it was actually, of the four major Turkish labor federations, it was the two of the four that were smaller, representing roughly some 600 to 700,000 workers, one public sector and one private sector. And of course, the venerable Turkish union that is known for their militancy, TÜMTİS, which represents truck drivers in Turkey, and is in a more than a year-long strike against DHL, the German trucking company, has not gone out on strike and in solidarity yet. So that may be something that we're going to look to for a turnkey sign there. But we're going to continue following these events. But first, we interrupted this sort of serious news from Turkey, and I encourage people to check out Occupy Gezi, check out Vice.com. Tim Pool has a great live cast of this occurring in real time. But we've got a new father on the phone, and it's important to celebrate life, even in the midst of very serious news. David Shuster, how are you?
Daniel, it is great to be with you. I've had a chance to listen to a little bit of the show today. You're doing great. Great energy. You guys are so informative. Great to have Cole on board as well. Pleasure hearing you guys on the radio.
David, I always say that I learn from the best, and there's anything that any praise that you give me reflects well on your mentorship. So I appreciate that. David, now there's been some controversy already surrounding the birth of your daughter, and that is that people are asking me. They're saying, "How do you pronounce the name?" And I said I think it's Ayala. Did I get it right? Or you?
It's actually the Hebrew version, and you've got it exactly right, Ayala. The English American version is Ayala. So it's like I as in pirate, like Aiya. and then y'all, like if you're from Indiana, and then la, like the music. We're also telling people, though, that the nickname of this kid, to make it easy on everybody, is going to be Lala, in the hopes that she will have her mother's perfect pitch and enjoy music and all that kind of thing. So Lala, Ayala, Little Schuster, Peanut, whatever you want to call her. Daniel, you have free range. You can call her whatever you want.
Well, it's a beautiful name, David. I'd have to tell you that. And so I credit you and Kira, Ayala, Lala, and for those who don't know, Ayala in Hebrew means a female deer, a doe, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And Ayala Danielle Rennert Schuster. David, how does it feel to be a father?
It's amazing. I guess you always sort of anticipate, what is it going to be like? And it's an even better feeling than you could possibly imagine. And, I was terrified going into this about the lack of sleep and all that. But, when you're losing sleep for something that's like so important to you and that you really love, it doesn't really, I don't think it bothers you as much. Same thing with, there's the poopy diapers or all that kind of stuff. I love changing the diapers. I love, interacting with her and singing to her and talking to her. After the first hour after she was born, I was telling her the news of that day. Here's what's happening in the news on the day that you've been born. And it's just that sort of interaction is just, it's so amazing. And it's just, I strongly recommend it to anybody out there who's considering being a parent or thinking about it. It's an even better thing than you can possibly imagine.
Well, folks, that's a look inside what it is like for an Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist to raise a child. They get to hear the news every day. I mean, I think that is a fantastic innovation. And, David, it's wonderful to hear that. It's wonderful to hear about, the joy that it brings you and the that it's not as daunting and as maybe it seems because it is so important.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that it does, it really inspires you regarding your partner. I mean, I loved Kira dearly before all this, but just to see how she's handled all of this and how sensitive she is and courageous and all the things and what a great, mom it's really amazing. You never, when you're with somebody, you never really know until you face, trying circumstance, how they're going to react and what their personality is going to be, and it just makes me even crazier about my wife than I was to begin with. So we're doing great. And we've got we certainly have some help. We have a grandma, my mom, Grandma Susan is here helping us out, and we've got some other family and friends who are coming by and came home from the hospital yesterday. We're doing great. I mean, it's an interesting, it's unbelievable experience, and it really does make you think what a miracle just the whole life process is.
Well, David, it is amazing, and we've been saying that the world is one Schuster better, one Rennert Schuster better as a result. And, but before I let you go, there's one really important question to ask, and that is, have you introduced the love for University of Michigan yet?
Well, today we did Indiana tennis because I grew up in Bloomington, and my mom plays a ton of tennis, and so we did the whole Indiana tennis routine by putting her in her little Indiana tennis T-shirt and an IU tennis ball. We will introduce her to the University of Michigan fight song and all the Michigan paraphernalia, I think, tomorrow. But look for it on Take Action News TV on our YouTube channel, Daniel. This one I can promise you is going to go viral, if nothing else, because when you have somebody as cute as her, oh man. But it's been fun, and you'll get lots of pictures, and we'll send lots of stuff out and put it all over Facebook, and it's just an amazing thing. And Daniel, thanks again you're doing a great job hosting this show, and sometimes as you'll discover when you have your own show, sometimes you like to think that things will fall apart in your absence, but things actually get better when you're doing the show, and it's great. You guys are doing a great job and carrying on Take Action News in very proud fashion, and I couldn't be happier.
Oh, David, you're too kind. David Shuster, everyone, a new father of Ayala Danielle. Happy Father's Day. That's right. And go Hoosiers and go Blue.
Thanks, Daniel.
All right, David Shuster. We'll talk to you real soon. Thanks so much. When Take Action News continues, we're going to hear from Cole Stangler about some of our military actions abroad and how they need to be curled back in a How It Should Be segment with Cole Stangler when Take Action News continues after this.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment,
and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation. At 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Welcome back to Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, finishing out our show here where I am guest host because David Shuster's on paternity leave. That sound normally signals the start of my segment at the end of the show, how it should be, but this week, my co-host, Cole Stangler, the staff writer for In These Times, is going to do that segment. Cole, take it away.
Right, Daniel. So I want to talk a little bit about the war on terror. I think that one of the most bipartisan policies across the board here over the last 11 years, going back to 9/11, has been the war on terror. It's this idea that Islamist-inspired terrorism constitutes a major threat to American national security, to American interests, that this threat operates unconventionally and as a result requires an unconventional response and also requires an enhanced presence abroad. This idea that our military operations abroad, whether they're covert and non-covert, that they know no borders, that the state needs to be devoting additional resources to ensure the effectiveness of these programs. This idea goes largely unchallenged But I think an array of recent developments, beginning with the NSA scandal that we've covered on this show, the implications that the PRISM program and all those programs have when it comes to our civil liberties. A recently published excellent piece of journalism by Jeremy Scahill on the covert operations from the United States abroad, in addition to the massive amount of military spending that's included in the National Defense Authorization Act that just passed this week in the House, I think serve as a great, these confluence of factors remind us of how deeply misguided and dangerous the foundational assumptions of the war on terror are, whether it's civil liberties, whether it's the legal implications of the covert operations, even if it's a simple moral and economic perspective coming up with the massive amounts of spending. So just go over that. I mean, putting aside debates over Edward Snowden and his motives, the NSA scandal reveals to what extent the war on terror has beefed up a massive, unaccountable security apparatus, the likes of which have never been seen before, frankly, in American history. So whether or not you believe this practice is even legal or not under the Patriot Act, I think there's no question that it's invasive, it's a threat to privacy, and is a really startling development. Tangentially, in a related development, Jeremy Scahill, an excellent journalist at The Nation magazine, has published a book and also a film called Dirty Wars, which documents really extensively the unconventional operations, usually involving the Joint Special Operations Command, taking place in Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, up to 30 other countries across the world. So we know about the drone warfare that's included as part of this. It's killed thousands of civilians, which is very questionable from an international law perspective. And also, one of the key takeaways from the film, they've contributed to what Malcolm X famously called the blowback theory of international relations, which is you don't have to go to Georgetown or work for a think tank in Washington to understand this, which is the idea that these kind of policies are creating the very enemies that the policies are designed to fight back against, that we're creating more terrorists every day with these kinds of policies. And meanwhile, despite the relative lack of media attention this issue has received, the U.S.'s non-covert war in Afghanistan is still raging on. Tens of thousands of innocent Afghanis have been killed, thousands of American troops. So even if you're not compelled by the human cost, which on principle I think should be enough, one should certainly be compelled by the economic costs of this. Up to over $600 billion have been spent in Afghanistan. At its peak, it cost $2 billion a week. And yet you had the NDAA passing by a wide margin, which actually increased spending in large part for this war, went up $5 billion from last year. So I think this can help serve as a wake-up call. So I think all of these factors that are in the news right now, whether it's the NSA scandal and the broader assault on civil liberties that this helps to reveal, the extent of the covert operations that are finally beginning to see the light of day thanks to the excellent reporting by Jeremy Scahill, and also the fact that we're continuing to spend money on this war in Afghanistan that Congress is voting for here, while we're cutting food stamps, while we're cutting social programs that people depend on. And this is a war that more than 60% of the American people are opposed to. That if all these factors here, if they don't contribute to an outright change in policy, which, let's be honest, is not going to happen, at the very least, one hopes that this will contribute to a broader rethinking, to a challenging of the core foundational assumptions of the war on terror and these kinds of policies. And this is something that hasn't happened in earnest yet, but I think it could be happening right now with with this confluence of factors. And this is also what Edward Snowden wanted when he released his documents, when he leaked the documents documenting PRISM, when he said he talked about a debate that triggering among citizens around the globe about what kind of world we want to live in. And so these factors, we'll see how things shake out, but that's how it should be.
All right, Cole Stangler, everybody. Read his stuff at inthesetimes.org. Where's it com? In These Times Mag.
InTheseTimes.com, yeah.
InTheseTimes.com, In These Times Mag. I encourage you to subscribe, folks. It's a nonprofit magazine, and you've got excellent reporting from the likes of Cole. And Cole, I have to say, I agree with you. And I got the chance to see the movie Dirty Wars last Saturday after last Saturday's Take Action News, and heard Jeremy Scahill speak in an interview with Spencer Ackerman from The Guardian afterwards. And I even got a chance to catch up with Jeremy Scahill, and he said to me that he thinks that he's not sure what the right balance is. He knows that the current situation is not good, all of our covert military operations there. But I asked him about President Obama's speech at the Naval War College just about a month ago, in which the president basically said he's winding down the global war on terror. Scahill thinks that the president is acting in good faith, and he told me that. How do you put that in context? Is this president going to be the one that winds this stuff down?
I mean, I don't want to speculate too much about any of the Joint Special Operations Command force, because I just don't know enough about that. But I will say that I don't think it's encouraging that this administration, even with the the scandal, it's been happening, and the polling that shows people are not in favor of such an intervention, recently announced that the U.S. is going to be providing substantial military aid to the rebels in Syria. So that's actually a new frontier here of the global war on terror, if not the global war on terror, U.S. interventionism abroad. And I don't think that's a very encouraging development.
That is a great point, and that is also recent breaking news that the Obama administration did decide that they were going to be giving small arms to some of the rebel forces in the civil war in Syria. And Cole, I have to agree with you. I don't think that we should get involved, despite the humanitarian tragedy that is occurring.
All the American public is on our side when it comes to that as well.
We had a great show today, folks, and if you want to take action to stand up for your privacy, to stand up for Edward Snowden, I know that the bold progressives at PCCC Progressive Campaign Change Committee are raising money for his legal defense. You can go to boldprogressives.org, and a coalition of libertarians and liberals at stopwatching.us are doing policy actions to help prevent this stuff in the future. On behalf of David Shuster, Pete Johnny Depp Callahan, Cole Stangler, and everyone at We Act Radio and Take Action News, this is Daniel Marins, wishing you a good week. See you next Saturday.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Sometimes I get a good feeling, yeah.
Welcome to Breaking Through with Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising on the We Act Radio Network. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about what's going on in the U.S. Congress and on the lawn of the U.S. Congress on gun safety reform. We're going to talk about where background checks are on gun purchases and how we can get them moving. We move on to hear what's happening with motherhood in America and how it can be that new studies are showing that motherhood is now a greater predictor of wage inequality than gender in the United States of America, and what you can do about closing the gap on wage inequality. Then we move on to talk to new dad David Shuster directly from the hospital 3 days after the birth of his daughter as we celebrate Father's Day weekend with him and talk about how we in the United States of America can catch up to the rest of the countries in the world on family economic security policies. We close the show with a craft that you can do with your kids as a present for the dads in your life for Father's Day that celebrates the caregiving responsibilities and the caregiving gifts that dads give to kids with a gift of their own. But first up, we have Shauna Thomas directly from Ultraviolet to tell us about the latest news with the Steubenville rape case and how the whistleblower, the person who helped bring the rapist to justice, is facing 10 years in jail due to his whistleblowing activities, while the rapists are only facing 2 years. Welcome, Shauna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Shauna, all that you do at Ultraviolet, I have to say, is flat out awesome. I do standing ovations from my kitchen as I see your outreaches come by on my cell phone, from my living room as I see them come by on my computer that I must admit I carry around sort of like another appendage in all the rooms in my house. And one of the things I think that I want to talk with you about today is your work with the Steubenville rape case and the irony, the ridiculousness that is going on right now with the fact that the whistleblower in the Steubenville rape case is actually being threatened with a harsher punishment than the actual rapist. Were you shocked when you learned about this? What was your response?
Completely shocked. We saw the headline come through, and we did a double take. I mean, somebody on our team emailed around and said, "This can't be right?" And unfortunately, it was. This poor guy, this Derek Lostetter, who, in our view, is a total hero. Made this case, made the national outcry over this case possible, made it possible for these two young men, I guess I should say, who participated in and were the primary drivers of the rape of this young woman. Were probably going to get off. They were being, they were being protected by football coaches and local law enforcement. And it wasn't until this guy, Derek Shuster, who at the time when he leaked the documents under the name KY Anonymous, made all of the tweets, all of the videos, all of the social media evidence basically available to the public. And it was only then that Ultraviolet and then, other groups and the media were able to really shine a national spotlight on what was going on there and make sure that justice was served and that, that we were able to at least expose the culture of rape in this small town, which is in no way specific to Steubenville, Ohio. But,
yeah. And one of the things about this story is it really, when you read the outline of what happened, reads like a bad John Grisham novel. We have a situation where horrible, horrible violence against a woman, a young woman, has happened. And then we have a man who's a 26-year-old internet security consultant, Derek Lockstetter, who pushes the police to actually do something about it. As you said, they had been standing down. The police had been standing down. They've been ignoring it. Ridiculous, awful ignoring of a heinous crime. And then the police actually did something about it, but then they also prosecuted him. How much time is he facing in prison, this person who has saved the young woman? In the form of getting her rapist actually punished.
This is the part that I think angers the most people, and certainly has angered our members. He's facing 10 years. The convicted rapist, 2 years. So the person exposing this heinous crime, as you rightly put it, is going to face 8 more years in prison, right? Than the people who actually committed the crime. It defies reason. It is, and it teaches the wrong lesson. If there is evidence out there and that could be protecting future women, right, from being sexually assaulted by a man, that evidence needs to be out there. And you obviously, we should not be punishing the people who are enabling justice to be brought in rape cases.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And Ultraviolet makes an excellent point. At the time that Derek Lockstetter actually did publicize the tweets, the evidence, just right out there online so that the police couldn't ignore them anymore, Ultraviolet sent in over 150,000 messages also backing him up, saying to the police, hey, let's prosecute these rapists. Let's not let them get away. What are you talking about? The evidence is here for all to see. So that public pressure actually helped get those rapists prosecuted. And now I think one thing that's important about your messaging today is you're saying that public pressure helped get the rapists, brought to justice or semi-justice. I don't think 2 years is necessarily justice. I just have to say that as an aside. But we need to use that public pressure now to also support Lockstetter so that he doesn't face 10 years in prison for helping.
Exactly. So, it's our book. It is the case that public pressure led to the prosecution and finally a grand jury convening of all of the other people who played a role in, kind of covering up this incredibly awful crime. And so we're using the same tactics, a lot of the same tactics to protect and defend Lockstetter and hopefully curb the any impact to the trial on his life.
Yeah.
So what we have done is we have collected petitions. Now over 50,000. We just launched this campaign. It was in the last couple of days, asking the Attorney General to drop the charges, and we're actually going to be hosting a rally in his defense, delivering the petition at the Attorney General's office next week. Derek himself is going to is planning to be there. They're of course, and his attorney are planning to be there. There could be some complications considering he's in the middle of this case, but right now he's hoping to be there and to thank everybody who showed up. So our members are still working out the exact day, the exact location, the exact time is in the Attorney General's office. It's early next week. So we'll keep you posted on that in case your listeners want to stuff.
Yeah, so listeners, go to ultraviolet.com, ultraviolet.org. All roads lead to Ultraviolet. Check out what's going on, how you can get involved, how you can support this important campaign. Let's talk about the laws for a minute, Shauna. What kind of laws do we have on the books that allow a whistleblower to be prosecuted with more intensity than an actual rapist?
Well, it's interesting because these laws seem to be interpreted in very different ways depending on the Attorney General and depending on the level of government, frankly. I mean, we're supposed to have whistleblower laws that protect whistleblowers. Whistleblowers have long been an incredibly important and critical social change factor, right, in our United States history, and the history of the world, particularly around corporate abuses. And so, it's interesting in the last couple of years the extent to which we've seen local and state governments and the federal government really cracking down on people who are using the power of the internet to expose crimes. I can't. They haven't produced a rationale for this change in approach. But I think it's really problematic. I mean, it's problematic around a lot of issues, but I think probably no more illustrative of like the harm it does for society and the bad messages it sends, to people who are really who believe in protecting women and from rape and from their assailants, that that you're going to be punished when you do the right thing. And proactively do the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a case in which there were a lot of people who were proactively doing the wrong thing, or just kind of like, casually sort of standing by for fear of being, rejected by their peers. I mean, you can put some blame on those people too. It's the people who take proactive effort to expose what's going on, particularly around issues of rape, which are so taboo and so misunderstood.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the misunderstood part for a moment. What's happening around our country often is people feel that, okay, we've gotten rid of sexism, we've got rid of violence against women. That is, couldn't be farther from the truth. What are you hearing from your members about the experience of women in the United States of America and violence?
Yeah, well, look, we've been doing, when we launched Ultraviolet, we had no idea. We launched Ultraviolet in February of last year. We had no idea how much work there was going to be to do, so much opportunity to be, to be exposing the culture of rape and the culture of violence in this country that is sort of flat out denied by a lot of people in the news media and political leaders. Look, Violence Against Women Act for the first time in its history last year was rejected, as you know, and it took way more effort than it ever possibly should have to protect women, the most vulnerable women in our country, from violence. Steubenville, Ohio, is not a. I mean, look, it was a particularly heinous sort of case, but it's not a unique one. Rape in this culture is an epidemic, particularly on college campuses, particularly as we've seen through a lot of the military sexual trauma hearings over the last few weeks in Congress. It's an epidemic in the military. And we're not. And when our members have participated in these campaigns, they participated at really high rates, and they're outraged. They want to do something. When we realized, or sort of over the course of the Steubenville case and our Reebok case, where we got Reebok to drop Rick Ross over some lyrics where he was promoting drugging and raping a woman, and through military sexual trauma and the Violence Against Women Act work, that rape culture in particular is not something people understand. We're kind of throwing around this term. But it's a relatively new concept as far as like mainstream discussion is concerned. We decided to throw an infographic out there, kind of connecting the dots about what really adds up to rape culture. Stuff like, on college campuses, less than 2% of the rapes reported are false, but people think more than 50% of the rapes reported are false.
Ugh. And is that up on your Facebook page, this image?
It is. It was on our Facebook page, but you'd have to dig really far probably to find it. The best place to go, and so I should correct on the website is weareultraviolet.org. If you click on our campaigns, you'll find that infographic there. That was shared 11 million times on Facebook. I mean,
that is fabulous. That is good news.
People are really hungry. People are very hungry for this information. It's a very uncomfortable topic. I mean, people typically don't like to talk about rape, but people understand, I think, inherently because they've been in situations where they've seen women, become victims of sexual assault, their friends and their family, if not themselves, at really high rates, and trying to understand what's going on here. So I think there's some opportunity to affect change. It's just, it's going to have to happen on a policy level. It's going to have to happen on a legal level. It's going to have to happen on a cultural level. And where I feel like, unfortunately, we're at the very beginning of that movement.
Well, thank you so much for being on with us, Shauna. Thank you for all that you're doing for women across the country to change the culture, the policies, and our nation for the better for women. For listeners out there, we will have the image on the radio blog page. When you go to Moms Rising, we'll also have a link to weareultraviolet.org so you can check out Ultraviolet. We're going to take a quick break, but stick around because we'll be right back with our next guest who's going to talk about what's happening with gun violence policy in the United States of America right now. You've been listening to Breaking Through with Kristen Rao-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We'll be back in just a quick flash.
Right now, everyone from A to Z. I can cast a spell, secrets you can't tell. Mix a special brew, put fire inside of you. Anytime you feel danger or fear, instantly I will appear.
Welcome back to Breaking Through with Kristen Rao-Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have with us an amazing guest right now, Poe Murray, who is the vice chair of the Newtown Action Alliance. She's a mom from Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Welcome, Poe.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
I'm so excited that you're on. Yesterday, you braved a terrible storm in Washington, D.C. to make a human ribbon in the U.S. Capitol to remind members of Congress that, in fact, it is the 6-month anniversary of the Sandy Hook Elementary School tragedy, and to remind Congress that more than 30 people are murdered each day with guns in our nation, and that the gun violence continues as they continue to wait to pass meaningful policy. How was it for you out there in the windy weather?
You know what, actually, everything worked out fine. We held a press conference, and initially, we were hoping that the press conference would be held outside while the human ribbon was being formed, but we had to move it indoors. But everything turned out well. The press conference was held inside, and we had Senator Reid, Leader Pelosi, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, Congresswoman Esty, and Congressman Thompson, who came and spoke to the people and basically making a commitment that this gun violence issue will not die, and that they're going to continue to push for common sense legislation, and in particular pushing for background checks.
And what is your feeling? Do you have hope? If you were a betting woman, would you bet on it passing anytime in the next 6 months? What is your feeling after being in Washington, D.C., hearing from leaders? Are you fired up and ready to go, or are you kind of feeling like, whoa, this is going to take a long time?
Well, you know what? I came back feeling pretty hopeful after Senator Reid stated that he has, he had committed to pushing this through, and he says it's not a matter of what, it's a matter of when.